Hello, and welcome to another week at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. We have an amazing show for you this afternoon. I'm extremely excited about that. And it looks like we have 130 of you here waiting. I'm really glad you could all make it. But, before we have the host come in and kick things off, I want to address something from last week real quick. Members of the Patreon of this show got a glimpse of some of the yet-to-be-released UCR merchandise last week. For those of you that don't know, Patreon is a great way to go above and beyond to support this show if you're so inclined. You can become a Patreon. There's a link below in the video description, and pledge as little as $1 a month to help this production out. Stuff like that is really appreciated, and every little bit goes a long ways. But there's no individual benefit from being a Patreon. Lou has long been steadfast that there is no premium content. However, this tenet was seemingly broken recently. Presumably, someone got a hold of the admin account. Someone claiming to be a hacker person posted photos of upcoming UCR merchandise. It smells a little bit like special access. And I'm going to be honest, it seems a little convenient. It may be a false flag. It's possible there was no hacker. If you want to analyze the hacker's post yourself and check out the merchandise, head over to the show's Patreon link. I will say this though, even if Lou and Michael's digital fingerprints can be traced back to this Patreon link, I think it's just like the UAP task force report. It doesn't really give us any special access, nor does it really give us what we want the most. In the case of the task force report, it's additional evidence. In the case of the UCR merchandise leak, it's the link to actually purchase these items. I'm eagerly awaiting the release of each. And while I wait, I've been pondering the mysteries of creation and what it would truly mean to be immortal. And these thoughts were provoked by scientific papers by Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Head over to my channel, Rather Be Squidding. There's some interesting ways that those topics tie into UAP, and I'll be exploring that in an upcoming video. But now, it's time for the event that made me look forward to Monday for the first time in ages. There's an amazing panel and amazing discussion in store for you today. And as always, leading us into this journey for the next 2 hours, your hosts of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Luis Jimenez and Michael Mataluni.
Rather, that was an awesome intro, buddy.
I call him like I see him. A little bit skeptical of you guys.
Immorality. We've got false flags. You guys are in the right place today, my friend.
Yep. Indeed, you are. Rather, I love the intro. I'm gonna tell you right now, I had nothing to do with that. Okay, there was no special access granted to the Patreon. I was hacked.
Forensic scientist, check it out on Patreon and decide for yourself.
Yeah, forensic scientist, please. And get back to me. Write a paper and I'd like to read it. All right, Rather, we'll see you in a little bit, buddy. Thanks for being here.
Great show.
Thanks, Rather.
Welcome, hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name is Luis Jimenez, my co-host right there, Mr. Michael Mataluni. How was your weekend, sir?
It was fantastic. I had a lovely weekend, had a friend in town, and we got to go to a soccer game. We got to hang out. It was a blast. Absolute blast.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a big soccer game this weekend, apparently.
Woo, boy. Italia.
France and Italy are not friends today, or England. France and England. England, I don't know who played. I don't watch this stuff. Anyway.
England and Italy, and it was a stellar game.
Stellar game. So I've been told. So before we get started, real quick, don't forget, the show is sponsored by BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995. Also, all of the tunes that you hear on the show are brought to you by DOS Tapes. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. We've got a wonderful show in store for you guys today. Of course, don't forget to like the channel, subscribe, share. There's 248 of you guys in here right now. If all of you shared this, it'd be even better. So do us a favor and do that. Ring the bell so that way you do not miss any of the shows that we have just this week. It's insane. Other than this wonderful panel that we have today on Wednesday, we have the guys from the National UFO Night Out event coming to go over equipment you might want to use, strategies, ways to be successful on this night out. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we've also got the Dragon coming back to help us review the last episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And then on Thursday, we've got a special edition show. Lou Elizondo and his father are going to come on the show with my dad and myself. It's not going to be a UFO heavy show. We're going to be talking about Cuba, be talking about Miami. We're going to get a really great inside personal window, not only from Lou's perspective, but from his father's perspective. What kind of kid was he like? You know, what was he, a troublemaker? I can't wait to get onto all of this stuff with his father. So don't forget to ring the bell. And then also Friday, we've got a killer guest in Teres Matla, who is essentially a museum curator in Maryland. So it's going to be a killer show, killer week.
Amazing week. Absolutely amazing week.
So Michael, would you like to introduce the panel today?
Yeah, I am so excited.
Guys, real quick, but just let me set this real quick because I know we're going to get some super chats. We're going to get a lot of questions. Rather's going to be writing these questions, and we're going to try and answer as many of them as we can when we get towards the end of the show. So definitely send them in. They're great ways to get your questions seen. But just know we might not read them right away, just because if it's in the middle of a great point or conversation, we don't want to interrupt the flow of that. So, okay, sorry. Now you can introduce the guests. We definitely will get back to it.
We absolutely will get back to it. All right, so we've got an extraordinary show for you today. James Iandoli was instrumental in putting this together. For those of you who don't know James, he's a researcher and does fieldwork investigating UFOs and related phenomenon, UFO, UAP, CE5, consciousness, and more. A direct and inclusive approach to the UFO phenomenon. Ladies and gentlemen, James Iandoli.
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're doing great, man. Thank you for putting this together. Honestly, we could not have done this without your help. So seriously, we appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. And next on board, we're so excited to have her. Owning of the UFO sighting tours, Melinda is a researcher, lecturer, abductee, covert human involvement in abduction, MyLab research, disclosure advocate. Ladies and gentlemen, Melinda Leslie.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be with you guys today.
I love your smile.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you.
So damn cute.
I'm genuinely excited. That's why.
Good. Well, we're excited to have you here as well, Melinda. Thank you for being here.
Your next two guests need not an introduction. However, we'll do it anyway. Recipient of the Leeds Conference, International Researcher of the Year, and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year, he became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May of 1975 with personal sightings of a UFO type object which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Cameron.
Good evening, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure is all ours, sir.
Wonderful to have you, Mr. Cameron. Last but certainly not least, he is one of the world's leading researchers, historians, and writers on the UFO topic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Richard Dolan.
Hey, guys. Thanks very much. Glad to be on here with everybody.
Amazing to have you all. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, so let's get this started. James, we had brushed upon the Invisible College in the Aviary, and you piqued my interest because I was like, "What's that?" And you were like, "We can do a whole show just off of this with Richard Dolan, Grant Cameron, and Melinda Leslie." I was like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds great, but come on, James, seriously, when are we going to talk about this?" He's like, "No. Well, let's get this room together. I think we can make it happen." I was like, awesome. So, James, I would like you to set up what we're going to be talking about today, and then let's just see where this conversation goes. Take it away, my good sir.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. People may be familiar with the Invisible College via the book written by Jacques Vallée, Invisible College, in which he kind of broke the silence about academics studying UFOs kind of behind the scenes to stay away from ridicule and people, ridiculing their work. But there's other groups that are associated that have overlap with the Invisible College, and that's the Aviary and the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group. And I actually got a really good quote from Hal Puthoff to distinguish somewhat of the difference between these groups. They're all important groups, all are, have contributed to where we are now, working behind the scenes on this topic in a very credible way, and a lot of them are scientists and academics. So the actual quote I got from Hal Puthoff to distinguish the Invisible College, the Aviary, and the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group is as follows. And he says, the Invisible College is more academic. The Aviary is just is a made-up name of interested individuals and researchers. And the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group are all highly classified government researchers, all very different groups, even though there are overlap in some of the individuals. And, I wanted Rich Dolan, obviously, is probably the lead historian alive on the UFO subject. So, he's also had some interactions with these people, and he knows the history of the subject very well. Melinda Leslie has been interacting with these individuals and studying all these groups for 30 years, if not more, as well as Grant Cameron. So I couldn't think of a better group to put together than these three.
Well, Melinda, I know that you were saying pre-show that quote was sort of the best quote to set off this conversation. So let's talk about it. Why was that quote the best way to start off this conversation? And what is because I just saw in the chat, like someone just said with a $5 donation, I'm a dum-dum. What is the Invisible College? In case they haven't read the book, they're unfamiliar with Jacques Vallée's work. Where do you want to start, my lady?
Well, when James told me, I think it was 2 days ago, about the quote from Hal, I said, James, we got to start off the show that way, because I thought that quote really, was great for a bunch of reasons. First off, Hal's been a member of all the groups. So he's been in it from day one and their original meetings in the early 80s. So Hal's been there all along. And he's pretty, open with many of us in the field, and that James is able to call him and get clarity on the groups. Now, as soon as James told me, though, I also realized, well, he did give an accurate answer to the differences. There was a little bit of a deflection, away from the significance of, and that he did emphasize the differences as opposed to the fact that all these groups were connected. And there's a reason why he's been in all of them. So there you go. So I thought it was perfect because it's directly from the source, from one of the members. And again, while it was accurate, there was a bit of a deflection in it away from the significance. So, and then as far as the Invisible College, I admit I did not read Vallée's book, The Invisible College. And I did a little bit of research online, but I'm actually the wrong person to ask. So I'm going to deflect on one of the other guys who can answer that more thoroughly, because please educate me as well.
Yeah. Grant, I saw you light up a little bit there. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I would distinguish the three groups. The Invisible College is these are all sort of unofficial. It's not like you got a membership card to any of these groups or anything like that.
Right.
The Invisible College goes back quite a ways, and it's just sort of a hypothetical understanding that there are a bunch of academics who don't want to be involved, or people who are in the background who are trying to get patents and stuff like that. And that I think Melinda can get into. I mean, now they're sort of running, what was it called, Melinda? There was another name they got for it now that Jim Semivan talked about, 50 people or more that are involved. So that's the academic. The Advanced Physics Theoretical Group used to be known as the UFO Working Group, written by a New York Times reporter about it. And then it was getting documents from the group, and it was run by John Alexander. And what he was doing is what they're trying to do now is trying to get funding from the government. So everybody in the group had a top secret SCI clearance. They were on their own dime. They were at a secure facility on the East Coast, and so that was that group that met in the mid-1980s. And then the Aviary was a group that was formed by Bill Moore and Jamie Shanderay, who, like Tom DeLonge, had a bunch of government people come to them and say, "We're for the government. We want this thing disclosed. We're willing to help you." And so what happened in the 1980s is that Bill Moore and Jamie Shanderay gave names to all these government sources. There was 24 government sources, and he gave them all these bird names so they could talk on the phone without identifying who they were talking about in case the phone was tapped. And and then later on, there was actually a group called the Aquarium, where they played off this, where Ron Pandolfi and from the CIA and Dan Smith, his sort of associate, Dan Smith started another group called the Aquarium. So then you had the catfish and the sunfish, and so all these things are unofficial groups, and they work on with each other. And the way I see it, the bottom line of the whole thing is that if you're an academic or a scientist or whatever, my impression is that what they do is if they find somebody's got material that's being fed, like Tom DeLonge's being fed, Bill Moore's being fed, they all run there to find out what are they being told, who's telling them, or if there's money involved. So Joe Firmage had a bunch of money. They all appeared and worked for Joe Firmage because he had the money and they could finance stuff. So they're guys that are moving around, but they're not really official groups in terms of, in fact, the Aviary, a number of them identified, they didn't even know they had bird names until long after the event. They didn't know. It was Bill Moore and Jimmy Shanderay who were using the names. It wasn't the people themselves.
Oh, so it was only two people out of this whole group. Go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, and I thought I'd clarify, add on top of what Grant was just saying. Yes, and as Hal also said, the nickname was the Aviary, and that was Bill Moore and Jamie Shanderay, as my understanding, gave them that nickname again so they could talk about them on the phone and in other circumstances without anyone knowing what they were talking about. And then and so they never called themselves that. From the beginning, they were the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group, or called themselves the Advanced Physics Group. So the way they refer to themselves is and Rich, please, Richard, please join in and add anything. But the Advanced Physics Working Group, like I said, the Advanced Physics Group is what they called themselves, or even just the Physics Group, and it was a core group of people, and it's remained pretty much to the day, certainly through NIDS and BAS, and prior to that. We'll get all into the timeline and how one group evolved into the next, I'm sure, coming up. But I want to give Richard a chance to say something.
Yeah, hi guys. There are a couple of things actually that first of all, I'm going to just say I think Grant and Melinda know the details of all of these groups better than I do. But there were a couple of things that I'm going to say a little differently. So the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group is very distinct from the Aviary. And as far as the Invisible College goes, that was just Valet's book from 1975. It was early. And we're talking about that because it's just a great title. Like the Invisible College, let's face it, is a cool name.
Yeah,
we all wish we had
it
first.
It is cool. It is very cool.
But Valet, yeah. So he's talking about it, and in connection with the strange and the paranormal, and it's not just UFOs. Like he talks about Uri Geller in the Invisible College, and basically how there's this group of academics out there who are very quietly investigating all these weird things. And by bringing in Uri Geller, he's talking about Stanford Research Institute, and that brings in Hal Puthoff, who, as Melinda correctly said, he's the one guy who's in all of these things. Hal Puthoff has consistently he's been in every one of these groups. But the really important ones to talk about is the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group and the Aviary. So let me just do that. So let's do the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group. This was actually written about years ago in a book called Out There by a guy named Howard Bloom in 1990, except he called it the UFO Working Group. And this book, it was a bestseller at the time, and people were like, wow, a UFO Working Group in the Pentagon. Who are these guys? Well, he basically got it kind of right. He got a lot of details wrong, and the name was wrong. So as I think Grant and Melinda were saying, John Alexander, who is still around, and he's a colonel in the U.S. Army, very interested in psi phenomena, starts this group. And he said this to me personally, and I know he has said this publicly a number of times in his lectures. So John, at the time, states that he was convinced that there was a UFO cover-up within the bowels of the Pentagon. That was his belief, and that was the belief of a lot of the people he knew. And so his idea was to start this group of absolutely top-notch scientists with security clearances, like Puthoff, like Bob Wood.
And Richard, though, the year is what again? 1975 when he's doing this.
I don't think Doty was part of the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group, was he? If someone correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't think that he was.
No, he wasn't. No,
he was not. But there were a lot of other very, very sharp people. Ron Blackburn was part of it, who's another colonel with PhD. Kit Green was in it, and many others. So what Alexander always had said was that the idea was to get these very brilliant people together to deal with UFOs, to put together UFO evidence, gather together. And then his hope was always that the real UFO group, wherever they were, would find these guys and bring them into the actual program. This is Alexander's official statement. And what Alexander always said is, well, we looked around and I knocked on every door possible. And I can tell you, he says, there was no other UFO group out there. We were it. And I spoke to one former member of the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group who said to me, that's total BS.
Yeah.
But he was afraid of Alexander. He was terrified of John Alexander.
He is a scary guy. I cannot imagine dealing with John Alexander, maybe 30 years younger. I'm sure he was intimidating.
Rich, I agree.
You agree, yes.
With what you're saying, that's BS.
I would give up the name of the guy, but why bother? It doesn't really matter. So anyway, and in fact, this other man was absolutely convinced and knowledgeable of other deep black budget competing UFO organizations. So the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group went for a few years. They met out of the BDM McLean Secure Facility in Virginia.
Wow.
I know Melinda's got a lot of stuff on this, but I'll let her get back into it.
What relationship did these folks have to the Pentagon at the time?
I beg your pardon?
What relationships did these folks have to the Pentagon, or they just had security clearance?
Different. They all had security clearances. Most, I think, were not
security
Pentagon
clearances.
employees.
Okay,
Melinda,
got it.
I'm just saying. I'm just adding in
SCI. They had
high level security clearances.
Yeah. So then the Aviary, just very quickly, I do want to make a
It had to be
correction.
SCI security clearance.
The Aviary was not started by Bill Moore and Jamie Shanderay, as far as I know. The Aviary was started by a colonel named Ernie Keller Strauss. You guys correct me if you have better information on this. So Ernie Keller Strauss was he was a colonel in the Air Force who worked at the Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and had apparently, this is the 1986. So it's the same year that the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group started meeting as well.
85 was their first meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you. So the first Aviary meeting, as far as I understand, was 1986. And it was Keller Strauss in his home. And he brought in people like Robert Collins, who was an Air Force captain. He did bring in Bill Moore, UFO researcher, and Jamie Shanderay. They were invited, both of them with certain intelligence community connections. He brought in Hal Puthoff. He brought in John Alexander. some more of the same names. Kit Green was part of this group. Who's the senator, the aide to Claiborne Pell? Scott Jones was part of it.
Jones, yes.
Yeah, and there were quite a few others, and all of these people they all had security clearances too, or if they didn't, then they were brought in at, like, I don't know about Shanderay and more, but they were all brought in. They all started talking and sharing stories about UFOs. And I know for a fact that Keller Strauss, who was the original leader of this group, like, he had stories about what was going on in Nevada, alien bodies, probably a lot of the things that Leonard Stringfield, the researcher back then, was digging up, stories of crash retrievals and alien bodies. And I know Keller Strauss was deep into that as well. And all of these guys were sharing all of these stories, basically campfire stories. And with these types of guys with security clearances, you have to assume they're all willing to share, but they all have to be careful, I assume, as to what they're sharing. They don't want to get into trouble. So they all kind of know the game. So Moore and Shanderay, who were absolutely talking about this on the phone, were afraid of their phones being tapped and all of that. And so when they would talk about members of this loose group, they did give them bird names. And either Moore or Shanderay, one of them, I guess, Nick said, well, it's the Aviary. It's like, that's the bird.
Yeah.
Bird
it's like a bird sanctuary. It almost sounds like a in the closet secret UFO club that is hoping to get invited to a bigger party without letting anybody know about it.
That's definitely the advanced theoretical physics group, without a doubt.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
And so, Melinda, did they get an invite? I mean, did they garner the attention of the people that they wanted?
Well, they definitely had their attention, and most of them currently, I think it's really important to reference their employers at the time. Quite a few of them were with major aerospace companies, heading up the Black Project departments, or involved in those project departments with those major aerospace companies, as well as other scientific organizations and whatnot. And that's why they had their security clearances in doing those jobs. Those companies knew they were there. They were there with the agreement of those companies. I know both Jack Houcke, who early on is one of the reasons I really got into this and know about it. He was a friend of mine, and he was Bob Wood's boss at McDonnell Douglas at the time of the Advanced Systems Analysis Department at McDonnell Douglas. And so Jack and Bob were both there, and McDonnell Douglas certainly knew that they were there, is my understanding. So it was kind of under the table, yes, and yet it was with the agreement. I mean, they had it at BDM Corporation in Virginia, and had it in a file skiff, had it in a secret room. So, and like Hal said, they were highly classified. I think that's a very accurate statement, right, James? What was his exact wording that he said that they were classified then and still are, or something like that?
Yeah, well, he said specifically the difference between all the groups is that everyone in the advanced theoretical physics group have a high security clearance, but the other groups were a mix of people who some did and some didn't. But for sure, the physics group, I mean, were all specifically people with high security clearances.
Yes, and I think it's important to note.
Well, one thing I would point out is that.
Sorry, Grant. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Grant.
He's on a little delay.
No, I think it's important to point out that Melinda got the notes from Jack Houcke when he died. So Melinda got the notes, the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group. And in fact, I started using it. They're still calling it the UFO Working Group. And then when I announced what the name was, then John Alexander said, well, it was called the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group, and nobody had notes. Then I said I got notes. Then he said nobody's supposed to take notes. But Melinda has Jack Houcke's notes after he died. She went through his files and got them. I was given the notes. I was given Oak Shannon, who, if you're familiar with the Wilson League, he's a player in the Wilson League. I was given his notes. I was told that I had released the notes. He has not died, so I have not released the notes. But the cover page showed that it's part of G, and I have the actual clearance of the two guys going into this, and it's a top secret restricted document. And so what happened was when I got the notes, I sort of announced this first at Eureka Springs. This would be about 2003 or 4. And suddenly I got a call from Hal Putoff. He said, yeah, I understand you've got notes of a meeting. Can you tell me who was at the meeting? So I sent him all the names except for Oak Shannon's name, and I never heard from him again. But I have the notes, and what the notes to me is what the story John is putting out. From what I can tell from the notes, they weren't getting anywhere. They knew Bobby Rainman with back engineering, but this went from topic to topic, all these notes, and they had nothing significant that I could see in these notes. Melinda can talk about what was in Jack Houcke's notes, but we both have the notes with the names of the people, so we know exactly who was in the group, and there was about 20 people.
I may differ from you in that there's, at least in what I have, there's extremely significant stuff. It outlines their existence for being and what they were interested in from the get-go, and that they still are today. And one researcher, I can't remember, somebody said this online recently, and I wish I could remember, I would like to give them credit, said this group had a revolving door, that people came and went from it over the years, and through its incarnations into other groups. See, there's all this overlap from the various groups, like we said, and even going back to, there's evidence and information that it went back prior to 1980. And different people involved, you know, or at least as early as 1980. But we know for certain with the notes we're talking about, if you guys have that, Mike and Lou, you could put those up. I gave them to James to give you the agenda and the minutes from that original meeting. We could just show people if you guys got them.
James, did you send me that in a?
I sent it to you in a message.
Okay,
Probably...
I just saw them. So give me a second. Yes, I can pull these up. I just need a minute, my lady.
There's two pages next to each other with handwriting.
Let me point out. Let me point out, Melinda. I'm not disputing that there was very high power people. I'm not disputing there was high power people. I'm saying what they discovered in terms of what they were trying to find. It looked like they couldn't find anything. In fact, there was the most significant thing I saw was this NSA guy that I think leaked the story to the New York Times, was talking about the fact that he had met a guy inside the Air Force or something whose job was to go into the UFO community and get pictures and have them destroyed. I mean, that was about the biggest, aha moment in it. But when you look at cattle mutilations, they really had not. It was just, they were theorizing. They really didn't have any distinct inside. They didn't know where the bodies were. They didn't know where the crafts were. There was none of that kind of stuff in the notes that I saw. And I've got maybe 20 pages of notes. Yeah.
But there was stuff like what it said, what they were interested in. And I'll just simplify it for everyone. I think if you guys go to the next slide after that of the next two pages with a lot of yellow highlighting on them, is that they were very, very interested in the technology of UFOs, so UFO technology. And this is two of the overheads they had. Back then there was no such thing as PowerPoint in 85. And so they were using transparencies with a transparency projector. And remember that?
I remember that. You're taking me back here, Melinda. I love
it. Some of your audience might go, huh?
What? Overhead projector? Yeah.
But I used to create those for jobs and stuff. But anyway, so, but these were two of the overheads. And then the highlighting was mine from many, many years ago. It's even kind of faded. But their objectives were the technology, as it says there, to obtain technology spin-offs, non-lethal weapons, biological, raw materials, et cetera. You can read it there. And then develop a gravity interaction system, that's, propulsion, and discover high-tech, reliable paranormal performance using technology to verify psychic performance, another paranormal performance. And then it goes on in the next page to consolidate the data to establish a threat. And then one thing that they're always interested in, as you can see there, it says UFO data, classified database, and abduction database. From the get-go, these guys were, and which is how I got involved, in part after I was told and why I stayed involved researching it, is realizing to the degree these guys had a strong interest in abductions and still do, even though they're not talking about it. The various members, and even including going to BAS and ATIP and OSAP and To the Stars and the task force, do have an interest. Well, I can't say the task force does, but I could say up until that point had a strong interest in the abduction subject. There's a lot of evidence for that continually, and they're funding abduction research projects and getting paying for the results from MUFON on the abduction transcription project, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much data there. I have a whole presentation. I mean, all about those details, and I hope maybe you guys link to it below, because this is not enough time, obviously, and this is not my presentation to get into it here. But people, I have all the details about that and my personal involvement with them and their involvement with abductees combined with their involvement in technology. And then the other thing it said on that last page, you don't need to bring it up again right now, but that last page also said to establish a threat. And I've even dialed back from that being of interest to them now. And in reviewing my notes for being on with you guys today, I realize how much their interest in a threat still existed going back then. And it made me go, like I had to reevaluate that. And so hopefully we can get into that later. But there you go.
Super.
That's just
I would just like to add,
yes,
thanks for that, Melinda. Again, to emphasize, at the same time that these meetings are taking place in this SCIF, in this sensitive compartmented information facility in McLean, Virginia, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group, at the same time, a lot of those same guys are meeting informally as part of the Aviary.
Yes.
And what we also know is that their interests were absolutely, there was no question for those guys that aliens were real. So that was a given. That recovered craft was a reality. So crash retrievals was a reality. And that bodies had been recovered and technology was being studied. And I think it's important to emphasize this. These are the stories, as we now know, were being discussed informally by, starting with Ernie Keller-Strauss. And by the way, Bruce Maccabee wrote I don't know if he hasn't published anywhere. It's called Houcke's Tales. Ernie Keller-Strauss was Houcke. That was his. So this is a book about Keller-Strauss and his stories. And I have an unpublished copy of it. I don't know if it exists anywhere, but I think it's on Bruce's website. You can read it there.
Can I ask you real quick, Richard?
Yeah.
What do you think that these scientists, these guys that are part of this group, if they were asked, let's just say publicly, you said behind the scenes that these guys are all on the same page that this is alien. Like, there's no debating it anymore. But if, let's say, they were put in front of a camera and somebody asked them that, do you think that's the answer they would give? Or would they go back to the, well, we don't know kind of thing? We have to be open-minded.
It's the CYA rule always applies. And, and all of them have got security clearance. It goes to this day.
Right.
One of the members of that group, when the Davis-Wilson notes were published in June of 2019, I have never given up the name of the person who showed me several pages of that document back in 2006. But one of those guys showed me in 2006 several key pages of that document. And when they were publicized in 2019, Grant and I have our own little fun backstory about all of that. But I begged the man who showed me those documents years before if I could just use his name. And they're all terrified. Every one of them, they're all terrified. They don't want to lose their security clearances. That was
way
2000, more than they're willing to take publicly.
That was 2006, though, right?
That's when I was shown.
When was the last time you asked him to share his name? When was it? Have you begged him?
In 2019.
Yeah.
When those documents, the 13 pages plus the 2 extra pages, 15 pages in all, when that came out,
yeah,
I communicated with the man who showed me the pages originally, and I begged him. This is in June of 2019. I was like, please, do everyone a solid here.
Oh man,
let's like go down in posterity together.
I can tell you, I got yelled at a little bit today by UFO Joe. Sorry, Grant, because he was talking about these Wilson Davis documents, and then we had Stephen Greenstreet who was like, but these documents haven't been confirmed. They
knows better.
Yeah, well, who knows better? Who does? I mean, that's the whole thing with this topic. Is it's so hard to pinpoint anything.
You listened to Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal talking to Jay at Project Unity from about a year ago, and you read between the lines of that interview.
Yeah,
the information. There are people who know this is real,
right,
and they're all terrified for one reason or another to go out publicly and just state the truth. Grant and I knew immediately, and Melinda knew right out of the gate that document was for real.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Real quick, Grant. Wait, hold on a second. Grant had something to say, and I accidentally cut him off. So let's get his thought in here.
Yeah. I just want to add, Richard, we had a conversation about this before. The other problem is not as much this being scared. I was cut out. I was dealing with a lot of these people early on, and they got cut out. And that was told to you, I believe, is you say, okay, can you tell me what's going on? Can you tell me who's running the show? And they'll say, yeah, but I'm not going to tell you because you're going to go to the New York Times. I'm going to have to deny it, and then nobody's going to stop talking to me. I think that one of the key things is they're trying to figure it out as well. So that's why Eric Davis won't confirm, because if he admit that he leaked this document, that he had this document and he was handing it out to people, and he had taped this whole thing, I mean, that's the end of his career. They're trying to seek access as well, and they're not going to out the thing because they're trying to figure it out as well. Once you talk and expose a secret, nobody talks to you anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
No, you're exactly right.
Can I ask a question? So I'm just curious. When you said, so you were saying that the UFO Working Group which was actually called the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group, which is also associated with the Aviary. You said that those folks absolutely 100%, it was a given that there were metamaterials, there were crash materials, there were alien bodies. This was a given, and they were all working backwards from this understanding. Yep. Do you know if any of these folks, and I know you can't give names, I know you can't share that, but do you know, did any of these people speak with you and say, we know this because we have visual confirmation, or we know this because we have physical confirmation? Do any of these folks who spoke with you, did they have direct physical confirmation?
I will answer that. Let me think. One of them, absolutely yes, to me personally. Okay. Absolutely, total confirmation.
Same here.
And then another one. Yeah. Another one is really good at weasel wording his way out of things.
Let me ask you this, Richard. Are these people that are open today?
Yeah.
That are out there?
They're alive, yeah. They're alive.
Yeah.
And they're working?
Are they working on this show? I gave you a list. You want to bring
famous.
up the picture of the list? Bring up the first page. Just bring up the first page of the list. There's 1, 2, and 3.
They're so I will just say one of them said to me years ago, and I said this publicly many times. I've never given up his name. But he said to me, I have known, he said this in 2004 to me. He said, I've known for 10 years that at deeply, deeply classified levels, he said, so compartmented that you who study this would still be shocked at how classified this is. He said, I know for a fact that at that level, there are scientists who have in their possession alien technology and at least one body that I personally know about. He practically whispered that to me when he said it. But that's the exact word.
Oh my gosh.
And so then I said, this is an interesting follow-up. I said, well, what did the body look like? And it's so funny. He said, well, I didn't say that I saw the body myself, But this is what exact quote was: "The data became known to me in such a manner with such personnel present that it was incontrovertible." That's how he gave it to me. Exact statement. So, you know, I mean, I'm sitting in his office with him, and I thought, I will believe this. I will choose to believe this. Because the thing is, look, I could have given him up at any time. And I realized he trusted me. He said a few other things in that meeting which are germane. He said, think of it this way. Let's say you have all the information, or you know who the top 10 or 12 or 15 people who've got all the real dirt on UFOs, like where the bodies are kept.
Right.
Like let's say you know that. He said, where do you go with that information? Do you think you go to the New York Times? This is what he said to me. This is back in 2004.
Right.
He said, so let's say you go to the New York Times. First of all, you know they're not going to publish it. But if they did publish it, what then? It's totally deniable. Then that person's name gets put out there, and you lose your security clearances for the rest of all time. And it's true what Grant was saying before. All of those people in that group, like it started out as the Aviary, and I always like to think of it as it graduated to the Bigelow crowd. You know, it goes into Robert Bigelow with NIDS, a lot of the same people. They bring new people in, and it continues to morph over the years, and ultimately into ATIP, which is the latest iteration. But all of those people, like, are they actually at the center of the labyrinth? No, they're not at the center of the labyrinth. They want to be there. They want the answers.
Right.
And they will do everything that they can within boundaries of law and their security clearances to figure this out. And which is why, like, when one of the members of that group later became Edgar Mitchell, of course, in the 1990s. Edgar Mitchell gets brought in. He's part of the NIDS group with Robert Bigelow, where you got Putoff and you got Green and you've got Colm Kelleher and Eric Davis. And Mitchell connects for a little while with Stephen Greer. In 1997, they go to Washington, D.C. Greer's giving his briefings, basically with the document that he got from the Rockefeller, Lawrence Rockefeller group that he wasn't supposed to do, but he does it anyway. And he takes this information and he's spreading it around D.C. And he's got Mitchell there, and they meet with Admiral Thomas Wilson, the deputy head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All right. And they get this meeting. And Greer does his lecture. He does his thing. I think they talk about Philip Corso. And they talk about where Greer had information, specific information about where a special access program that dealt with ET tech was, gives this information to Wilson. And Wilson knocks on doors for a couple of months and finds it. That whole story is right in the notes. All right. But anyway, so what happens? Mitchell finds out in June of 1997 that Wilson's denied access. But how much detail does he get? He gets some detail. So what does he do? He talks to the Bigelow crowd. That's the new version of the Aviary, basically. And he says, this got denied. And when Wilson retired 5 years later, all right, he leaves from the Defense Intelligence Agency. They decide to send one of their own. They send Davis to go do an interview with him immediately upon Wilson's retirement. And Davis hits a home run interview, gets all those pages of notes. And that's how that whole thing happened.
Man,
And
I just feel.
Yeah,
go ahead, Melinda.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in answer to your question, I brought up here a quote I have in that full presentation I do from Jack Houcke in my original conversation with him. Again, Jack was Bob's boss at McDonnell Douglas. He was there in the original meeting and part of the group always up until his death about 5 years ago now, I think. I'm not sure, at least 4, maybe 6 years ago. I'd have to think about that. But Jack Houcke, when I originally was told this, by Ed Dames of all people, I think he was thrown out of this group, and I think he was pissed, and he used me to get back at them, and he did a great job, because when he told me and I went to them, they were really pissed off. So mission accomplished there, Ed, but this is what he told, this is what Jack said. My first conversation with him somewhat ended, or almost ended, with him saying, so I'm quoting Jack Houcke here. I know more about it. He said basically that subject that you're research associate Randy Kopang and your friend Steve Polidoro know about. He said and he'd become good friends with me and Steve. And so he says, that subject you guys know, in other words, UFOs, that subject you are so interested in. And then this is the quote: "I know more about it than you could dream that possibly anybody could know." And anyway, so that's what he said. Jack Houcke said that I knew more about it than possibly than you could dream anybody could know. In other words, and he said everything. He went on to list things, but it was everything. It was bodies, crashes, reverse engineering, it was everything.
Wow. Okay, so I got this name, this list of names that you asked me to pull up, Melinda, and you call it the Cosmic Club, the Players, which I think.
Well, no, I don't. I'm quoting. That's Grant's name, and I quoted Grant.
Got it.
And I have 54 names total there, so you'll see there's 3 slides. But just to show everyone in the beginning, so I gave Grant in my presentation, full kudos for coming up with the Cosmic Club as his nickname for these guys, and I think that's a way to refer to them, that they're the Cosmic Club.
That wasn't me.
And it's a combination.
That wasn't me. That was Jim
groups and where they overlay with each other. So this might help everyone understand it if they're looking at that picture. If you can bring it up again.
Yeah.
Because bring that up and get the list, because everyone will see that in my presentation I have an X next to if they were in the working group, if they're in To the Stars Academy board, or what I thought was the extended, support group to that, if I had reason to believe and knowledge that they were, like for instance, Kit Green, not on the board, but part of the extended group, and Gary Nolan, etc. And then the ATIP group at the Pentagon, if I thought they were associated with that. And then I had what I called Old Disclosure, which gets into the Aviary and even ISSO and it's Rockefeller Initiative, etc. And then I have, if they have a connection with the intelligence community or a clearance, that was a given. And then I have, if they're like Bass and Lockheed and Advanced Technology Development, and then consciousness, or what I call the ET mind, which was psi research, abduction research, etc. And then I put a check. And so if they were directly involved in funding or researching in any of those areas, they got a check. And then I reordered it, and the numbers of checks adding up are to the far right. And then I ordered it, and I was surprised that the person who was the most involved, and it's because he's funded so much of all this, was Robert Bigelow. So he came up, and then Hal Puthoff and Colm Kelleher, Alexander, Kit Green, Elizondo, Scott Jones, Blackburn, Ron Blackburn, who I've had a lot of dealings with. Oh my God, the stuff Ron told me. Oh my God, my head swims.
He's really knowledgeable. That guy.
Yeah. He told me a lot, man. And then you have Eric Davis, Jacques Vallée, Bruce Maccabee, Jim Semivan, Gary Nolan, Paul Rapp, Chris Mellon, Jack Houcke, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on how many X's they got, that's where I reordered them.
So can I ask you a question, Melinda?
Great list, Melinda.
Can you pull up that? Can you pull that up again?
Yeah, this list is awesome. By the way, this is awesome,
so I'm curious. So the ET Tech
and that's one of 3 pages.
Right. No, we'll show the other 2 in a second.
So the ET Tech and Development, specifically, like for example, part. Advanced Technology column. When you put a check mark next to these folks' names, is it because they've disclosed to you that they've worked on advanced extraterrestrial technology, or have?
No.
Okay.
No, that's a good question, but no. It is a good question. It was based upon the research of Randy Kopang and me, and some of it's conversations with them. Yes, in some cases, and then it was extensive research, documentation over the years. It was doing 30 years of research into this, and then we had extensive, notes and et cetera. So a lot of it is documentation. A lot of it is their own stories or their own interviews or their own lecture presentations, and books they've written and books other people written, like all Jacques Vallée stuff, So every time we got another piece of information, we added it. And so that's resulting in
Hey, Melinda,
research.
May I just mention on Randy's behalf, because he's your buddy, but I've met him a couple of times. Randy Kopang is not everyone knows him. but my God, he is a smart and dedicated researcher into this subject. He goes deep, and so when Melinda says she was working with him, like, I mean, those two work together very carefully. But Randy has one really great book that I have called Camouflage Through Disclosure, I think it's called.
Yeah.
He wrote it a number of years ago.
Which is a quote from one of the guys involved, how they've managed all this is they've camouflaged it through limited disclosure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an absolute quote.
So he's someone that, I don't know how well everyone knows who he is, but some of us in the UFO field know him, of course, and I'd love to run into him again. He's a very, very smart guy.
Well, I can put you in touch with him anytime, Rich, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Grant, any thoughts to add on to that?
Smile, Grant.
Yeah, he's a little frozen.
One thing I'd like to mention here, you asked about is there, do they know the hardware stuff? Eric Davis he was never a member of, he was brought in on the NIDS program as the chief scientist, but he's openly talked numerous times about that there's hardware. When he went after Lazar, he said, and the guy's full of it. The stuff wasn't even at Area 51. He's made these comments that they shut it down in 1989. He's quoted by the New York Times. The other point I'd like to make is that I asked Jacques Vallée about the famous story, the core story, the meeting at the Denny's restaurant in the 1980s where Hal put off Kid Green and Vallée sit down and they say, there's a bunch of garbage going around here. What do we know for sure? And they come up with what's always been called a core story. We are being interacted with by some intelligence. We have hardware and we're not doing very well engineering the hardware. And that's what they had agreed on the Denny's restaurant. And I asked just recently, he confirmed, yeah, that story's true. I mean, we did meet at the Denny's, and that's what happened.
James, anything you want to add on to this so far?
And Wilson.
I was going to say, just like what Grant was saying, Eric Davis has spoken pretty openly about a lot of this, surprisingly so. So Eric Davis is somebody you got to watch and listen to. He knows when he can break or bend the rules and how they can be bent. The interview that he did with Alejandro Rojas, he's talking about the whole story of how you get into these programs and why you would be read into a program, if your potential use, either now or in the future. And so I definitely recommend people go find that interview and listen to everything he's saying. He's basically telling the whole story from an insider's perspective. So that's really interesting. And again, he said in the New York Times, they quoted him saying that, the U.S. government's in possession of off-world vehicles. And this, I believe, was also, he was part of the briefings that were given to defense agencies, when they were being brought up to speed with the UAP task force and ATIP.
Right.
So that was being told to high-level officials in classified briefings, and Eric Davis was present. Christopher Mellon corroborated that, and more so, Christopher Mellon stated that, Dr. Eric Davis told them how they may go about finding those programs, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I want
Melinda.
to add real quick what Grant was saying about the core story. I think it's very important. I had heard that from Grant, and then all of a sudden the Wilson interview notes, I want to say memo, but it's actually interview notes by Eric Davis. Wilson mentions the core story, in there. And I think the core story is about the technology and the aliens. In other words, the reality of it. And I think that's what Grant was just saying. He was breaking up someone on my end, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard him just saying. And I just wanted to add that term is in the Wilson interview.
Well, Melinda, is it core story or core secret? Certainly the phrase core secret repeats itself several times.
I think it's the same thing.
No.
Oh, well, yeah.
No,
core
they're
secret.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So core
Clarify
secret, where Wilson's talking to Davis, and Davis is probing him for all of the names of the contractor. What's the name of the contractor? He's hoping it's Lockheed or Boeing or someone. And Wilson's like, no, core secret, can't tell. And so when Wilson would say that's a core secret, that's like a secret that if you give it up, the results are so catastrophic that it will just destroy everything. So those are secrets that must not be. But there is this core story that Grant was talking about as well, that Putoff and Green and Valet agreed upon, and I'm sure all their colleagues probably agreed on. But I don't know that Wilson discussed that.
Okay.
In the
Okay.
notes
My
with David.
mistake then. I assume we were talking about the same thing. My mistake.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Let's clarify when we don't understand, because the audience is going to get confused. So that's great that we clarify these things.
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
the core story, and I believe that the core story is also talked about in the book Mirage Men. You can see it's outlined there. They kind of explain. Kit Green's talking about what the core story is in that book. So if people want to read a description of the core story, I made a graphic of it. It's on my Instagram. It's on my Twitter. But also at Mirage Men, it talks about the core story and what it is. Basically, the U.S. government is in possession of alien bodies and extraterrestrial technology, or, UFO technology and UFO occupant bodies.
I just want to add one thing here. We were talking about crash retrievals. We were mentioning Eric Davis, and someone mentioned the 2019 interview he did with Alejandro Rojas of Open Minds. That's a really good interview.
It's
and
dynamite.
I pulled up two little quotes. The transcript's out there. Anyone can read it. So listen to what Davis says to Alejandro. Davis, as I think Grant was saying, like, Davis knows exactly how far to go and what line not to go over.
Yeah.
And he's as well plugged. So this is what he says to Alejandro. He says, lo and behold, you find out through the vice president or the president of one of the legacy aerospace corporations. And it just so happens that they were a guy that worked on the crash retrieval program. Just like talking at him.
Wow.
And then he says this. He says, and you're working with another aerospace company. Okay, well, guess what? We did it too. He's talking for them. And we don't do it now, but we did it in the past. And here's what we can tell you off the record. And here's what we can in here in a secure facility. And you'll have to go another step before we tell you what it is on the record. You have to have the right clearances. You have to have the authorization for the need to know, and then you can get the full story. So it's a very complex process, end quote. That's Davis talking to Alejandro. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
And you said something very, very important there too, which is even within the group, Ron Blackburn explained this to me in great detail. Within the group, not everyone was at the same level of knowledge or in on it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they were keeping secrets from each other. And he said this very funny thing about keeping information from Bob Wood that I might get in trouble for this, but I'll go for it. That Ron Blackburn said, we weren't telling Bob Wood anything. Bob couldn't keep a secret.
Yeah, but
That's funny.
I know it's very funny. But he said,
I'm sure Bob would not be offended. At this point.
yeah. I think he'd go, wait a second.
The other thing.
But here's the thing.
The other thing I should mention.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Grant.
No. I just said you and I discussed this, Melinda. One of the things people should read if they want to get a real good story on this is Valet's book number 3, Forbidden Science, and book number 4, Forbidden Science. He basically described when we first discussed it, Melinda, he busts out and drives over everybody. I mean, he even had the hardware thing where he's talking to Kit Green and this idea where we're not getting anywhere with the hardware. And he said to Kit Green, but you guys over there with the biology stuff, you're probably doing better. And he said, maybe it's just as much of a dead end road as your metal stuff. And so you see when Jacques Vallée starts talking, he says a lot of stuff about what was, because he was dealing with all these guys. And that's what I always maintain is that these guys were talking to each other because they could talk in confidence. These people had security clearances and they're trying to figure out what's going on. There's no point in talking to the guy on the street. You're trying to find the people inside the intelligence community who have the answer to what you need. So they were talking to them, trying to figure this thing out.
Well, during part of that was when Valet and those guys were also on the scientific advisory board for NIDS and then BASS. So that's when a lot of that conversation that he's talking about, particularly in his fourth book, was happening, was during that time and leading up to that time. So kind of the NIDS into BAS period. And which gets into, you guys bring up that thing, if you can, Lou, real quick, that picture where I show the overlapping timelines. I think that'll help the audience. And not even if it's absolute exact, but it was to the, best of my knowledge, but I have the years across the top and different groups like the Working Group, Aviary, Bigelow's involvement, the Rockefeller Initiative, Bigelow involvement with MUFON and NIDS and BAS and ATIP and To the Stars. And you can see they all had different projects and things going on overlapping with each other. So every time I heard of a project or something, I put in a star. I forget, I have a graph somewhere that says what the red versus black stars mean. I'm just forgetting right now, but you can see the overlap. And then the areas where I used a lighter color, like you can see it goes from a darker blue to a lighter blue, or from a light purple to, or the orange fades, is a questionable still involved, where I had reason to believe they were, but I couldn't back it up with specifics or documentation or quotes from that,
Melinda?
like, yes.
I'm curious about a little bit, like Bigelow / MUFON. You have that starting in 1994. Is that true? Is that happening?
Yeah, with them funding, I'd have to go back and read their notes, but yeah, that was the beginning
94.
of. I know what the red stars are. The red stars are specifically abduction research. So each red star is specifically if they were doing abduction-related research or funding it.
Right,
so
well, this wasn't the
funding,
same as when he was doing the Star Team funding. That was later.
No, this is before that. This is I'm either talking about like the Carpenter debacle when he funded.
Oh, yes. That Bigelow was involved in that. Okay.
Yeah. So that's I'll go into my
Very
PowerPoint.
good. This is really good.
But so when it's vague, that's when I have the color lighter. But can I say the Advanced Working Group was directly involved up to 2001? Yes, but beyond that, that's why I have it in blue. But these guys' involvement with abduction research continued, hence the red stars there. So I'm like going, okay, they were continually involved, and it's still the same people doing the same abduction research. So, I think their changing of names over time was both because they refocused and maybe new people came in, but I think it was useful as a form of deflection. You guys can tell me what you think. But
Good comment by Seth Couture in there just now. I just saw that. He's talking about the men that Eric Davis doesn't want to identify are Mike Kostelnick, Noah Longmire, John Deutsch, Paul Kaminsky. I agree. Just want to say that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, real quick. Okay, so we've hit our first hour. So what I want to do is I just want to reintroduce everybody in the room, just in case there are any new folks who are here. And I love it, Michael, because our audience is like, it's reset time to reset. They're so used to the reset here. I love it. So let's go ahead. Let's reset the room. Let's reintroduce everybody, and then we'll keep this conversation going.
Do you mind if I go come back with a beer? Is that okay?
Oh God, please, yes, Dolan, go grab a brewski.
Are we taking a little break? Because I'm going to go get water. Unfortunately,
go get some water. Go get some water, girl. You got it. I love it. Grant Cameron's just hanging. So yeah, go for it, Michael.
Yeah. Well, while they do that, why don't we go ahead and kind of reintroduce exactly what we're talking about here today? So we've got quite a few different groups that we're talking about. So we're basically investigating based on what Grant Cameron here, Richard Dolan, and Melinda Leslie are talking about in relationship to the Aviary. We've got the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group, and we've got the Invisible College. What's that?
Grant's going to take a break too. Everybody, it's just the three of us now.
Everybody's taking a break.
Everybody's taking a break.
You with me? Iandoli's here. Okay, so again, we're basically going back in time and discussing some of these groups that are associated and some not associated with investigations into UFOs, both in the federal government and outside of the federal government. So we've basically broken down several of these so far, again, including the Aviary. If you're just joining us now, make sure you go back and watch the beginning so you can catch up on this. But we're discussing the Aviary, we're discussing the Advanced Theoretical Physics Group, and we're discussing discussing the Invisible College, among others. We've gotten into ATIP, OSWAP, BAS, etc. And again, for those of you just joining us, we've got an amazing panel. James Iandoli is here with us. He's a researcher and fieldwork investigator of UFOs and related phenomena, UFO, UAP, CE5, consciousness, and more, a direct and inclusive approach to the UFO phenomenon. James also helped organize this event today, so we really appreciate you doing that for us, James.
Sure thing, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. We've also got Richard Dolan, who's one of the world's leading researchers and historians and writers on the UFO topic. Thank you again. It's so wonderful to have you here, Richard. We really appreciate your time
Thank
today.
you. I'm glad to be here. And by the way, I'm just connecting with one of the guys in your chat, Seth.
Yeah.
Seth, I don't know how to get into the chat right now, but send me an email. So my main email, I'm just going to say it. God, I hate doing this.
Don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Because I don't want you to be overloaded.
I can actually.
James, do you know how to put the email in the chat?
Richard, if you want to send that to me, I know Seth, and I can send it to him directly.
Yeah, we can send it to him.
Fine, that's best.
Do you want me to send it to him directly?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Just send it to him.
Real quick though, Richard.
Thank you, Seth.
Let's get Grant back in here real quick, Richard. I want, you know what? There's two things. First, for some reason, I want to call you Papa Dolan. I really can't explain why, but I do. I just want to call you Papa Dolan because I feel like
I called my father Papa Dolan.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Complete.
Well, please don't hate me if I continue the tradition.
Perfectly fine.
So Papa Dolan, the second thing is I'd love to see you grow out that hair again. God, you silver fox, dude. You were looking so good with that long hair. That's why I put the picture in the thumbnail. But yeah, it's hot.
I saw that and I was like, wow, that takes me back.
Yeah.
I was actually responsible for cutting you out of the background on that, and I wanted to capture as much of that flowing hair as possible.
Yeah.
It was funny. It was a phase. And,
please bring back the phase.
I never really managed a way to contain the hair so that it didn't go all crazy.
Richard, the more uncontainable, the sexier.
I will confer with the relevant people involved, and I can come to a decision.
All right. Okay. Hopefully, Papa Dolan grows that hair back out. And third, I guess, lastly, what are you drinking, Papa Dolan?
Oh, this is Guinness, my friends.
Oh yes,
love some Guinness.
He's already killed half of it. If you want, go grab another one.
No, it's my last one. I have I'm in Rochester and we have Jenny Cream Ale. Not the worst beer. I support the local people, Genesee Cream Ale. But look, it's all about the Guinness.
Well, now we know what to buy if you see Richard Dolan at the bar.
That's right.
Always
Guinness. Always Guinness.
All
right, let me finish this reset, Lou, and we'll get moving.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, and so we've also got Grant Cameron with us today. He's the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. He became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May of 1975 with personal sightings of a UFO-type object, which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. Grant, thank you so much for being here today. I know we have a little bit of a connection issue, but you've been fantastic, and we appreciate it.
Just add one thing for Grant, please.
Sure.
He's like the greatest researcher in the world on UFOs and the United States presidents. End of story.
And U.S. presidents.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's, Grant does consciousness research more. He's more interested in that. But look, the fact is, Grant, you know it. Everyone knows it. When it comes to United States presidential policy on UFOs, you are the best.
Awesome.
End of story.
Amen.
And finally, we've got, last but not least, Melinda Leslie, owner of the UFOs.
New material coming in.
Uh-oh.
Well, we lost you, Grant. What'd you say?
You got a weird ass delay there.
We just got to give him a second to catch up.
Something's going on with Grant's internet today.
There we go.
It's a Canadian thing.
It might be.
We've had this problem with Canadian Wi-Fi before.
Yeah. All right. Let's get Melinda in there.
Last but not least, Melinda Leslie, owner of the UFO Sighting Tours. Melinda is a researcher, lecturer, abductee, covert human involvement in abduction, research, disclosure advocate. Thank you again so much for joining us today, Melinda. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm enjoying this because it's not often I get to talk about all my research about this. And Richard and I have talked about it, and James and I have talked about it, and Lord knows Grant and I have shared research for years. And so this is a real pleasure to be able to bring these people together and discuss it all at once. And we need to, obviously it's a huge deep subject that will require much more time. So maybe we
Yeah,
can
and maybe a few more shows. Maybe we'll have you guys. We'll do this whole thing again sometime. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. We come at you 5 days a week, every single day. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, click the bell so you know whenever we go live here on the Unidentified Celebrity Review. You can also catch us Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Singularity Lab. Click the link below and follow us there as well. Lou, why don't you kick us back into this conversation?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, who did we lose there? We lost Melinda? What
just
happened?
fixing a curtain.
All right. No worries. Okay. So James, where should we shift gears into next? What's the next part of this conversation that we should be looking at?
Well, I mean, we've been talking a lot about how, this group and the overlap, but we talked about it a little bit, but we could talk about the relevancy today, how it's so relevant in everything that's going on today. Mm-hmm. All these people were, involved. I mean, if you look at ATIP, and OSAP, you have these people that were actually working on those programs. So it goes all the way from back in the 80s all the way up until today.
Well, here was one thing that I know rubbed Michael the wrong way. And it was about Bigelow. In particular that in the FAA manual, there used to be a phone number that if a pilot had seen something strange, they could go to this page in the manual and call. And that number was controlled by Bigelow. It's... Michael, if you can explain sort of why that rubbed you the wrong way, and
absolutely, and it wouldn't have rubbed me in the wrong way if it was 1989 or 1994 when he was involved in the project. But the fact that we're pilots, modern day fighter pilots, are told if they see a UFO to call Bigelow. That, to me, that just seems so outside of any standard operating procedure that would allow us to get the technical details associated with this phenomenon and study it in any sort of way. Like, I'm not a huge fan of only studying this within the USG and the military industrial complex. I do believe we need to study it outside of those things. But when inside, shouldn't we have standard operating procedures that go up the proper levels of command so we can actually start to create standard operating procedures for logging and detailing this information? Yes.
It's a great idea in theory. Melinda,
oh, wait, Melinda, you're muted.
Melinda's muted. You're muted. We cannot hear you. I have something to add if you...
Yeah, well, watch figures that out. What do you got?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, we can. Let me just get this in, Melinda, and then I tell
Sorry
yours.
about that.
When Bigelow was getting that, I'm thinking, am I right, that it was during the ATIP program?
Yes.
Yes. So he actually was a defense contractor.
Yes.
That would be a relevant person to get that information.
Yeah.
But the reason that they would do that is totally for deniability, of course. Like the military is not ever going to want, especially at that time period, to admit that they're taking UFO reports or that they're taking it seriously. So everything is on the down low for them. And Bigelow is actually perfectly positioned because everyone is known. Robert Bigelow is highly sophisticated when it comes to this subject. Highly sophisticated. He's been deeply involved since the early 1990s in a serious way. He funded the abduction conference at MIT that got John Mack out into the world back in 1992, and he's been deep ever since. So he knows the subject exceptionally well. He's gone out of his way to gather data about this for years, and he's a reliable player that the DoD knew that they could work with. So if he's collecting data, they could get that from him.
Can I ask a follow-up, Richard? Can I ask a follow-up to that? Real quick, Richard. I'm just curious. So, in relationship to that, I'm still trying to understand. I mean, obviously, we don't know. The U.S. government doesn't know always what our foreign adversaries are doing, right? So they could be developing technology that's outside the scope of things we understand. So I'm just love to get all of your perspectives on why you think this has so much stigma, even in the last 10, 15, 20 years, even prior to the Nimitz incident. Why was there this stigma, considering the fact that we have adversaries out there who fly things?
That's easy. I'm going to do this real quickly. I'm going to give it to Grant and Melinda. You have to go back to the 1940s, and you have to assume Roswell and other crash retrievals were real, because they were. They happened. They were the recovery of advanced exotic technology that did not originate from this civilization, and they knew it at the time, full stop. So if you've got this information, you have to contain it. From their point of view, there's no other way. You can't just tell the world, oh, yeah, we got this technology from some other planet. Yeah, no problem. Let's share it with the world. No, of course not. America didn't want to share its atomic technology with the Russians. They're certainly not going to want to share exotic alien tech. Absolutely not. So what do? The only thing you can do is deny, completely deny. You have to work with your allies and your people in the media, and you debunk. That's what the Robertson panel was about. That's what Operation Mockingbird was about. You control the media. You've got your people in there, and you dismiss and you ridicule. And you create a culture by which UFOs are just not to be discussed. Yes, they knew that the Russians, not the Chinese back then, but the Russians were certainly someone you had to keep an eye on. But I think it was pretty well understood that the Russians weren't flying saucers around either. So, no, this took, it was many, many years of this culture of secrecy to develop. Now we're in the 21st century, and now we've got advanced computer programs, and we've got artificial intelligence on the way. And so now we're really at the point where global military systems are increasingly able to create, weapons platforms and propulsion systems that are becoming we're blurring the lines of what were once UFOs. So it's a little more complicated now. But for decades and generations, the only solution was to debunk and ridicule UFOs and push it to the fringe as much as possible. That's what they did.
Grant, do you have any follow-up on that? Or go for it, Melinda.
Sorry, I agree completely. That's all. I just agree completely with what you just said.
Well, here's my thing is
we still have a lot of denial.
Okay. sorry, Grant.
I'm just saying you still have a lot of denial. Even if you take a look at the Congress thing, I mean, what did we learn now since they started to brief Congress? Really nothing, except Congress is now in the loop of secrecy. It's like when you ask, well, what did they tell Congress? It's like, well, we can't say. It's a non-disclosure agreement. Everybody's playing the game because nobody's going to put their cards on the table. If you're playing the game and you realize this technology will change the world, and you can kill people more efficiently and rule the world, you simply aren't going to put your cards on the table.
Right. Well, here's my question, and then we've got a super chat question that we're going to get to from Cosmic Deception. Okay, so here we are. It's 2021. We've established that there seems to be groups of very well connected, not government, but possibly government contractors who have been privy to this information. They've seen it in SCIFs. Some of them have even had the clearance. Are the same people who were, I don't want to call it a group. It's almost like a book club is the way, like this really exclusive book club. But instead of books, they're talking about UAPs and UFOs. But then again, they're also compartmentalizing that information within the group, which I think is hilarious. But I guess my question is how does that group start to become a little bit more transparent? Are we going to see and hear from these folks a little more now that the story, and like you said, Richard, the technologies, the supercomputers, the singularity, as Mike likes to call it, we inch closer and closer to it every day. So these technologies start to get blurred. Do you think that's going to give the confidence to the people inside these organizations? And
are you talking about the UAP task force specifically?
I'm talking about, is there still an aviary today? Do we still have an invisible college today that does the same thing? And if so, are we going to see these guys be a little more open as opposed to just staying in this closeted book club and never talking to anybody except for in, dark places and in shadows where they're like, don't say my name, because if you say my name, you're going to ruin everything.
I have my own opinion, but maybe Melinda or Grant want to jump in first on this.
Well, I have a feeling, Richie. I know, Richard. I think you might agree with me. There's a yes and a no to that. So let me. Okay. the group known as the Working Group that morphed, it's morphs throughout time, but it morphed into NIDS. And then when NIDS got funding from the U.S. government, it became BAS. And then BAS was the beginning, and then it changed to ATIP. And then they were fully getting government money, which is why, Mike, like you said, why those reports were supposed to go from the FAA to Bigelow, is because they were going to BAS and then they were going to ATIP. So it's actually rewritten in the FAA thing, go to BAS, and then it's rewritten and there's documentation showing that's go to ATIP. So so that shows the transition there. And then ATIP was always under OSAP, and so was BAS, because the funding for the research out at Skinwalker Ranch was from OSAP. So we are able to show the layering of these things morphing from one to another, and they're forming. And then, of course, ATIP, we know well, begat what we now know as the task force, the UAP task force, and because of Elizondo and his whole story, we know that. So, yes, I think the working group guys in the midst of this have stepped into the background, and the part that became ATIP became more public, with the exception of one unique kind of outlier in the midst of that, which was To the Stars Academy. So with To the Stars Academy, they were being public, and there is a public face. So that became the new working group, if you will, with all the people still associated, because Jim Sammy Van always told me we're like 50 people. It's actually a bigger organization. So that's where you get into some of the same, probably most of the same players still involved to varying degrees in that, because you get into Kit Green and you get into Nolan and his involvement, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the whole thing. And so I think that became kind of the public face. But as far as their involvement with their security clearances, you're still not going to get anything from them.
Right.
So anyways, that's my understanding. Please, Grant and Richard, add in your understanding of it.
I'll just very quickly say I totally agree.
Okay, thank you.
Totally agree. Grant, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to add that the Cosmic Club, I think, was a name that Chris Bledsoe had used, and I think it was coming sort of from Semivan, this idea there's 50. It doesn't really benefit these guys to come out. You may get the odd one. One of the things I think that I always point out that people forget is that there's a lot of money involved in this, that a lot of these people, Hal Puthoff has patents, Gary Nolan's got patents, Lou Elizondo's got patents, that some of this has got to do with, if you're in the background and you're working on this, I know Tyler D, who's the famous NASA guy, he's a member of this Cosmic Club. He doesn't want his name used and stuff like that. Gets very upset. He had an invention he claimed that he got from the beings. I know money was involved. It was absolutely astronomical, the amount of money they sold the company for on NASDAQ. You got to remember that in terms of the Invisible College as well, is that, if you're working on this leading edge technology, are you going to put it out for everybody to see before you file for a patent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good idea to remember this, because sometimes it's easy for people to get into this mindset that this is like the Disclosure Club.
Yeah.
That's not accurate.
Well, because they're not there to
Not at all.
disclose. They're just kind of there to. It sounds like they're
Depends
just
on the
like.
person. Depends
well,
on the group.
It depends on the person in the group, but again, it sounds like a book club. It sounds like they're there to compare notes, and it's almost like AA. You go to this group and you get to talk about it with people, because you can't go home and talk about this with your wife. You can't go home and
they're out to help themselves,
right.
And if they can bring the public along a little bit, they might not be averse to that. They're not anti-disclosure per se, but actual genuine UFO disclosure, that's not their agenda, and it really never has been. But they have done they have done good things for the UFO culture and for the UFO disclosure effort in general. I think it's undeniable. And I just want to say this too. I'll have this opportunity. There are folks out there who continually, and some of them are very high profile UFO people, I'm not even going to get into names, someone else can if they want, who are calling all of this like disinformation and a psyop and a false flag even. You hear this. And And I just think nothing could be further from the truth. I think this is absolutely, not only is it wrong, it's toxic, it's poisonous to our field. We're not dealing with a false flag. This is not like some government op. Right. All of these people have government clearances. Yeah, they do. And it's not like they're angels. I mean, we're human beings, so they've got their own motivations. You know, they're not out for revealing everything. I've had people write to me frequently saying, well, I don't see why they're not just, you know, doing this for the good of humanity and telling everything they know. And I'm like, they can't. Right. I would love for them to do that too. I would love that, but that's not going to happen. That's not their world. That's not how they think about this. So they have their own motivations. And as Grant pointed out, yes, I think money, and Melinda said this too. I mean, money is important. Now, where are they getting their money? How are they going to get their money? It's a really good question. Certainly the TTSA business model wasn't really well designed to make a lot of money, in my opinion. So, but I'm sure
it was designed to spend money. That's for sure.
I think, you know, do they want to get a larger piece of the defense pie? They want to get what Lockheed's getting, or Boeing, or Raytheon. You know, maybe that's it. I don't know if they could really actually ever compete with those types of organizations, frankly. But
what do you think
it's also true, like some of those people, and Chris Mellon's part of this too. I've had some long conversations with Chris Mellon. And I'm just going to say this. I mean, my opinion, I think he's very frustrated with UFO secrecy. I think that's real. Yes. I think that's genuine. Yeah. I think it pisses him off, and it bothers him, and he wants to see some change in our society. And I don't think he's the only one.
And I think that's a good point that you bring up, because that's important, because somebody like Christopher Mellon is somebody who doesn't have to, he's not reliant on a government contract, right? He doesn't have all of these other needs when it comes to finance. He comes from a pretty damn rich family, and he's got some means of his own. He's not reliant on the government. So I think the more we can take money out of the equation, I think it's a lot easier to believe people. But what do you think about like somebody like Eric Davis or even Admiral Wilson? Will they ever go public, or even, you know, what maybe like record something before they die, just in case? Like, what do you think about some of these guys and what they can or might reveal?
Wilson's never going to give it up. Never. Yeah. And you know, Davis, I doubt it.
Let me.
I doubt it. I doubt it too.
Let me tell a story that we
jump in.
Yeah, they all have the security clearance. They all play the game. We dealt with Dr. Eric Walker, the former president of Penn State University, for a number of years. He had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. And we were trying to get him to talk. He was very, very old. We said, come on, talk. You got a chance to talk. And he basically said, this is just curiosity. Admit to me, all you're interested, you're curious as to what was going on. Why should we change the rules to satisfy our curiosity? And in the end, he had a file. We knew it, a UFO file. And his son told us that when he went to look for the file after his father died to move it to the university, it was gone. So he played the game nobly right to the very end. These guys have, government obligations and security clearances, and are doing what they think is right. And you still have everybody's in their personal interest. There's the famous joke, what does a one-star general think about all day? And he thinks about being a two-star general. So everybody's looking out for themselves, and they're playing the game. And if you violate the rules, you're out of the game, and you're going to be very patriotic. You think you're helping the country. And that's where I think Richard and I and Melinda have a difference in terms of people who are very critical of all this thing, is once you actually meet these people, when you actually talk to Helpoff or Eric Davis, or they're just ordinary people. They're just ordinary people like you and I, and they're trying to figure it out the same as you and they're just at a little bit of a different level than you and I are. And I think the onus is on us to listen to them, because they know more than we do.
Absolutely, Grant. Yeah. By the way, the Eric Walker story, which Grant really dove into back in 1990-ish or so, is one of the most important UFO stories out there. I've talked about it a lot. I mean, I didn't talk to Walker, but I picked it up, and I'm into that story. It's one of the most important UFO stories out there. And Grant was one of the original guys to research it.
Real quick, you guys, this is an amazing conversation. We got about 20 minutes left in it. So what I'd like to do, because I know there's more. First of all, I want to invite you all to come back, not only as a group, but individually, because I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to have with each and every one of you. So thank you for being here. What I want to do is bring in Rather, because he's been writing down questions from the audience, and a couple of them have been really, really great questions.
I believe one person indicated that when my hair grows out,
yes,
disclosure will happen.
That was probably my favorite one. And by the way, it says that's directly from the CIA. So grow the hair out, Papa Dolan, and we've got disclosure. It's all on you, my friend. It's all on you.
I see my responsibility is clear.
Yes, exactly. If you do that, I will buy you. Well, I can't say that because I know I can't afford it. But I was going to say an unlimited amount of Guinness. I'm sure we could work up something with Ireland, but we'll figure it out. All right, so rather be squidding. Welcome. Thank you for being here, dude. Thanks for writing down the questions. What do you got for us? I know there was somebody that you sent me in a private chat. What was that question?
Yeah, Cosmic Deception. He actually super chatted this twice, and I think he mentioned that he would cry if we didn't answer it. So here it is. He asked, is there info regarding NATO Special Forces UFO recovery squads? And is the US or the UK military really EMPing UFOs right out of the sky? And they do a hashtag Group 58, which I'm not aware of.
That's all new to me. Grant or Melinda?
Yeah. Richard, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm the same thing. Like, what? It's all new to me, and please, whoever has that information, please provide it to Grant, Richard, and I, please, because that sounds interesting.
I think that Lou Elizondo maybe made some vague references about that.
Well, I will say this. I'll just very quickly. I've got some very great researcher people, quiet folks. They help me. They're very good. If someone were to provide me with that information, I could at least pass it along to my people.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Grant,
I would very much doubt their EMPing stuff out of the sky. I even had the conversation with Jacques Vallée about this thing about the metamaterials, that we think that the metamaterials are falling, that they come across the galaxy and then little pieces start falling off. And I said to Jacques, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, this crazy stuff. And Bob Bigelow had said that when he was asked about the crash. He said, well, yeah, there's a crash in Roswell. There was a crash in the Soviet Union, and there was one in China, and there was one in South America. I think they're seeding it. So I said to Jacques, do you actually think that their pieces are falling off the craft? Or is this like Tyler D, the famous NASA guy, called it the gifting field? And then Jacques said, I think I came up with that idea of the gifting field. And that's the whole idea, is even the crashes may be gifts. They may actually think
that's a possibility. I agree with you.
I think that if you look at the Nimitz thing where the thing drops 80.
But I don't know. Look, we've been definitely trying to shoot these things down.
Because you take a look at technology with
Wilber Smith in 1961. You know this. Had two American researchers who visited him, and Smith is just 1 year before he died, and he talked about having held a little fragment of a UFO in his hand. He said this was shot out of the sky by your Air Force. He's talking to these Americans, and I said I held it in my hand. I gave it back, and they asked, "Who'd you give it back to?" He says, well, it's pretty high up. Did you give it back to the Air Force? It's higher up than that. But he was talking about an item being shot out.
I would.
And Frank Fashina, I just want to finish this thought. Frank Fashina, who I very much admire his research in his book, Shoot Them Down, particularly, and also the Braxton County.
I just going to bring that up, exactly.
Frank talked about how F-86s in 1952 were equipped with this brand new missiles, which, it sounds almost incredible when you think back in 1952, but that the mission was to shoot these UFO flying saucers out of the sky, and that we were actually attempting to do that. And is it actually impossible? I don't think it's impossible.
And there's also that story. I brought this up. Go ahead.
That Grant had something too.
Yeah, we'll put
I
because he's on
think
a
that
delay.
we've tried. I was at the Friedman Library. I got the Cuban story where the Cubans locked onto this thing and the plane disintegrated.
1967
Navy intelligence
case,
picked up out of Florida.
Yeah.
Wilber Smith believed that Wilber Smith believed that piece had been shot. I mean, the idea that they shot this thing with a bullet in 1952 off a craft. Again, you can see the thing where they thought they shot it off. This thing dropped in, was picked up by the CIA. There's that whole story. That guy had it, and it fell into his yard. It was all very convenient and stuff like that. So yeah, they believed that it had been shot off. Believed that it dropped from the sky. That this UFO just sort of was flopping around and then it exploded just circumstantially. The more you look, the more you start to whether this is, skeptic argument across the galaxy, and then pieces falling and they start crashing. I mean, like they had people 7 UFO crashes in New Mexico in the 1940s, and that doesn't sound like how it's technology or the idea that we're done by lightning. I mean, I think we're getting at a lot. The technology, if you take a look at they were able to do it and drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level or come within inches of a plane. It's just technology is way more advanced than we is, and physical as we think it is. As and we're trying to figure out how does this thing pop out? How does it work? And it's not what it is. And the idea that we're reading blood.
What did you?
I lost a lot of that.
Yeah, we lost a lot of that,
Could have
Grant,
been
just because
EMP
you're
the phone
breaking
line.
up pretty bad. But I think I got the gist of what you were saying. James,
You
what
were saying that there was a lot of evidence of a possibility of seeding, which Valet suggested. I mean, that's reasonable to think. It's not impossible, but
Rather
I mean,
has
there's like
theory.
a number of. If you Ryan Wood did a really good book on crash retrievals called the hell is it called? Magic. Got it around here somewhere.
Yeah, I have it. Just right
Yeah,
here somewhere.
it's a very good book, and he lists like 75 potential crash retrieval cases up through the end of the 20th century. And it's not that all of them are sure shot, absolute cases, but some of them are very well attested. Yeah, that's it. Magic eyes only. Good job. Yeah. And when you think about it, like people will argue, well, why would advanced aliens have come across the universe and they just crash here on Earth? I mean, there's a lot of unknowns that we don't have. First of all, our own aircraft crash all the time. Not all the time, but 1 out of every 11 million, but we fly so frequently that we have crashes every year. Right. And we don't really know what the genuine traffic out there is of these UFOs. They're out there every single night. That's the thing we don't really go on to the National UFO Reporting Center or even look up Filer's files. George Filer's still going strong. He collects reports from around the world. There are major UFO sightings that take place every single week around the world. There's something going on by unknown beings. They're doing something. And so there may be a lot of traffic we're not aware of. So if some come down every once in a while, it may not be actually as impossible to imagine.
James, did you have any thoughts on that?
I was going to say, as far as stories of UFOs being taken down, I think one of the most interesting ones is Starfish Prime, and it was a high altitude nuclear detonation. Right. And it's interesting to note that Tom DeLonge had talked about this. He talked about it a little early on before, I guess, the WikiLeaks happened and people found out who his sources were. But after realizing, and again, Tom DeLonge, he says things you don't know what to make of it sometimes. But this one he emphasized in particular, and one of his sources we know is Neil McCaslin, and the guy was really high up at Wright Pat Air Force Base, which is where materials have been taken for technology, and that coincides with the EMP. That Lou Elizondo mentioned. So, and I can't say so much on this really, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. But that was one that was confirmed to me was a genuine case. That was a genuine.
And not only that, you mentioned McCaslin and James, but he wasn't simply the head of the lab at Wright Pat, where it's believed that alien bodies or tech might have been studied. That's where he got most of the attention. People talked about that. But he was also the head. Trying to remember, he was in SAPOC, the Special Access Program Oversight Committee. This is the entire committee that is highlighted in the Davis Wilson notes.
Yes.
All right. And so McCaslin, I think, was head of that at some point. In other words, he would have had access to all of those special access programs that dealt with ET and beyond. He would have had access to that.
Just quickly, I wanted to know if Melinda, if we could get a link to your slides at some point. We have a lot of folks asking.
I think the best thing is to give them a link to that PowerPoint presentation. James, did you provide that to them to add at the bottom?
I'll
send it to them.
Send me the link and we'll pop it in the chat so everyone can check it out. We'll also put it in the description. That way people can reference it when they watch it on replay. Because people are dying to see it.
It's the presentation I did 2 years ago for UFO Denmark.
We'll
and I updated it for that presentation. And it's the whole PowerPoint presentation has the few slides we use today combined with many others in it. But,
Melinda, that's such great work you did. And by the way, UFO Denmark, I just want to say hi to Pia Knudsen.
Yes.
Amazing lady who runs that.
Yes.
And her whole crew there.
They were really good to me, Richard. They were super good to me. And
wonderful.
And I did a whole My Labs presentation for them. And like a month later, I did this presentation for them.
Yeah. Well, this is just wonderful that you did this, Melinda.
It's a killer list, and people are going crazy to see it. So I'm just popping it up here. I know it's not for a real long time, you guys, but I just want you to get a quick look at it. So if you guys want to grab some.
And I do a whole breakdown on the timeline that interfaces with my involvement with this group and these people, and the timeline of every time they were involved in a research project, an abduction project, whatever they did. If I had information on it, it went in that timeline. So it's their whole timeline combined with how I knew them and interfacing, and then the research of Richard and Grant injected in there as well. So, but that whole thing, when you go through it, I reviewed it actually for today because it had been a while since I visited the specifics, and I wanted to make sure I had names and dates and stuff right, and that I knew how to get to them quickly in the PowerPoint. So if it came up during today, I could reference it, and it made me go, "Whoa! Well, I had really detailed information in there that I'd forgotten."
Yeah, you did.
So, yeah.
Just do me a favor, James, when you send me the link, just let me know. That way I can copy and paste it to everybody. Even if you want to put it in our private chat here on the right side, just pop it in there and we'll make sure Rather shares it. Okay, so Rather.
The description as well.
Yep, and that as well. Okay, do we have any more questions, Rather?
Yeah, there are a couple more. One, probably my favorite of the remaining ones, was from Jeff Perry, and he asked for the panel, is there a contact inoculation subtext to the overall disclosure narrative?
Can you repeat that, please? A contact inoculation subtext?
Yeah, so I guess, like, is this kind of preparing us for contact? Do people maybe think that contact is imminent and that this is getting us ready for that?
Oh, I see.
It's sort of like TTSA. Like Tom DeLonge always talked about the idea of seeding these things in movies and television to prepare the human consciousness for contact.
I'll interject in that.
Go for it.
I think Grant should too. I think contact already happened at a government level. This is a whole side tangent we haven't really covered today, but in my MilLabs research, the other presentation, I go on about how so many experiencers who have the covert human involvement then see ETs and the government working together in these underground bases. It's actually a really common experience. I've experienced it myself. And so based on that, I think contact's already happened. I don't think they're preparing us for contact. I think they're preparing us for eventually this information coming out. I think it's become a secret that can't be kept. I'd like everyone else's input on this. I think the whole UFO secret's become something that they know because it's worldwide and it involves other governments, and we're not the only ones having information. And now multiple governments and private organizations are spacefaring, and they realize it can't be kept anymore. So they've come up with this elaborate plan to eventually bring us up to speed. And even all the guys with To the Stars and Lou and Chris and everyone have said something about this. If I remember correctly, this 7-year plan Jim Van has told me repeatedly. So I think they've got some kind of long, plan going on here. And what we're getting with these classified reports, these 73 pages or whatever supposedly it is, 70, going to the Senate and now Congress when it comes back from their break, apparently supposed to have a closed door session or anything. So if they're getting additional information, I think this is the beginning of a long plan. It's a fine line between the evidence shows that and Melinda wanting to believe it. You know what I mean? So I don't want my personal, I hope this is moving forward thing to get in the way of what's actually going on. But I go back to what these people are saying publicly, what they're saying to each of us privately. And so I think it's the beginning of a long process. So again, the answer to that question is it's not preparing us for contact. It's preparing for telling us contact has already happened.
Right. The truth disclosure. Real quick question. I know we got a couple more and only a couple minutes left, but a lot of people are asking Richard about the claims of the classified version of the UAPTF being leaked to you. Can you shed any light on that? Rumor?
A little bit. That came to me literally 5 to 10 minutes before I went live on my YouTube channel a week ago. Came to me from a source. So I'll just explain. So what came to me was from a person that I know very well, someone I've known for many years, who's in a good position to get things from time to time, and gave me what was allegedly, and this is to him, this is like allegedly to him, bullet points of some of the key things about what was in the classified portion of the UAP task force report. So of course, what we got were 9 pages, actually 6 pages of a report, which everyone talked about. And what was said to me was that there was the classified portion had a certain elements in it that were discussed, and those elements were leaked to this individual who sent them to me 10 minutes before I went live. And I had to decide, like, do I do this or not?
Right.
And I decided to do it. I thought, look, I'm not going to misrepresent anything here. People can make up their own minds. And I said, this is what happened. I'm not vouching for them or anything else. And some people really just like, I'm going to watch my language here. They basically just went out of their minds.
Yeah.
Like, how's he doing this? This is disinformation.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I said it might be. I don't really know what it is. But the information supposedly was that there were various types of unusual craft that were being tested at Area 51 in Tonopah, but that these craft, to the knowledge of the investigators, had not left that region, and so therefore were not responsible, as far as anyone can tell, for the UFO sightings that were being discussed. And that was essentially the classified portion that I discussed. I did hear from one of the people in the club, in the Cosmic Club, who said, nope, it's not my information. That's supposedly not in there. So I got one denial already from one of those members on Melinda's list there. And maybe that's true, or maybe they're just throwing me a line. Like, we're in a hall of mirrors, and
Right.
I found that information to be at least plausible, which is why I put it out. I thought it didn't sound crazy. There was one reference to a K song and then a certain research, and many people emailed me about this individual. This is a real individual who's done some legitimate research in that area. So, I mean, there's legitimate leads.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I don't rule it out at all, despite
Richard,
what my inside guy said to me.
There you go. I looked up that same individual and thought that seemed very plausible, the K-Song guy in his research.
Right. Yeah, there's my slide right there.
In this, I fit my research and what I knew. I thought there were many things in here that seemed legitimate. And of course, if this is a classified piece of information, as Semi Van has told me repeatedly, we have to deny it. We can't comment. I mean, even about the Wilson document, I go back to, I had a 43-minute long non-denial conversation with Jim about it. And so, they would have to deny it or denying anything, knowing anything about it. But I think it reads like some real information. The more I've looked at it, yeah, I thought so too.
I don't know if that, I mean, that's clearly boiled down by someone else from the if it's legitimate, it's rewritten, and I have no idea who the author of this is.
Right. Well, I can tell you some things that really I mean, like the first 5 or 6 things, I'm like, yep, that makes sense. Yep, that makes sense. You know, like ion propulsion systems. Yep, I can see the government working on that.
Almost say prosaic. Mundane.
Yeah, it almost seems like just. Let me ask this: Is it possible? And I know it's probably not in 1947, but let's just say within the last 15 to 20 years, is it possible that the United States has cracked this technology? And it's a multitude of things. They're covering tech, they're covering an amazing story, and they're also trying to get budgets approved. Can't it be all of these things at once and not just one?
It's absolutely possible that secrets have been cracked. Absolutely possible, despite, when people study the Davis-Wilson notes, and we keep coming back to that because they are important. And, Wilson famously was told by his black budget gatekeepers that no, our progress has been painfully slow and we can't really figure this stuff out. Well, I mean, that's what they told him, and we can believe that they told him that, but is it actually true? Keep in mind, Wilson found 4 programs, not 1, 4 within the Special Access Program Oversight Committee records, and contacted one of them. There's a bunch of these in there, and there's a lot we don't know. And how far have they gone? Would they really want? They told Wilson what they had to tell him because he was becoming a nuisance. Yeah. He's becoming a problem, and they couldn't just pass him off and say, "Oh no, we don't know what you're talking about." Like that couldn't fly, as it were. Yeah. So they told him enough what they had to tell him to get him off their back, but they weren't going to tell him more than that. And I do believe that there has been progress.
Real quick, Melinda, before you answer, can you do me a favor? Just because I don't know if James has the link, but if you could go on to Twitter right now and just send me a link to that PowerPoint so that way we could share it before we end the show. I want to make sure folks have that link. Just take your time.
James, you have it in Messenger.
I have the link, but I'm using the StreamYard on my phone.
Got it. Okay, I see what's happening here. Okay.
Good statement by UFO Joe in the chat there, by the way.
Here. Where do you want me to put it?
Red Wilson, two-page letter. You could put it in a message to me, in a Twitter message to me, and then I'll pop it. I'll read it and get it on my end. I'm sorry. What did you say, Richard, about UFO Joe?
Yeah, UFO Joe's in the chat room. Hey, Joe. And he just writes, read Wilson, Davis, and Miller's 2-page letter to Davis. Yeah, that's very important. He writes anti-gravity and alien reproduction vehicles, allegedly. The ARV story, which is a story that I still find credible. Mark McCandlish, who recently died, possibly suicided. We really don't know. Self-inflicted gunshot wound? Who knows? I don't think he was suicidal. But anyway, McCandlish, of course, is the source of this. His friend Bradford Sorensen. They were going to go to Norton Air Force Base for an air show. Sorensen goes alone. He takes a high-level defense official with him. McCandlish couldn't go. And they end up going to Lockheed instead, Palmdale, and the big hangar, and they see 3 hovering craft behind a curtain. The mama bear, papa bear, and baby bear. And Sorensen describes them in extreme detail to McCandlish, who draws them. And that drawing's out there on the web. But that's the ARV. The general who was talking about them at a podium, according to Sorensen, described them as the alien reproduction vehicles, explicitly so, and stating that they had been traversing, at least if not all, then much of the solar system by then, 1988. Sorensen said when he looked at them, this is according to the people who interviewed him, I've never spoken to him, but he said when I looked at them, they looked like they'd been beaten up, that they'd been put through their paces. Yeah. So, and they were hovering. They weren't suspended by ropes or pulleys or anything like that. They were hovering.
Wow.
So, and the general also said, apparently, that they operated on the vacuum of space. Now, this is 1 year before Hal Puthoff's first paper on zero-point energy, otherwise known as the vacuum. So the question is, did this thing run on zero-point energy?
Real quick, just want to say a huge thank you to Silly Humans for the $50 donation. We really appreciate it. Just gives nothing but thumbs up and sharing love for the show. So seriously, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so rather, were there any other questions that maybe we can answer quickly? Because we got a minute. We're actually over a minute.
Did we lose Grant?
We did. We lost Grant Cameron.
No,
Yeah, unfortunately, he naturally popped out. That wasn't something that happened on my end. But we've got Grant's
Canada's got an
links.
internet curfew now.
They really do. Every time we connect with somebody in Canada, it's a nightmare. But we, what was I going to say? Oh, God. Anyway, rather, go for it. Any other questions?
One more by Cosmic Deception. It's a little bit dark, but if you can comment on it really quickly. He asked, I'm guessing you guys haven't gotten to the human mutilation aspect in Brazil and Russia. And they're wondering if you have any thoughts or comments on
Is this Stephen Greer's new movie? Is that what you're talking about?
Human mutilation, I don't know if it's mentioned in there, but yeah, I guess it would be aliens as a very bad threat.
There's a lot of stories of human mutes that are out there for sure. And I happen to believe that some of them are true. Why wouldn't I? I mean, there's animal mutilations galore. You've got David Paulides' Missing 411 research, which talks about some incredibly bizarre cases that just don't make sense. Every bit as bizarre as any UFO abduction story.
Yeah.
So, mutilation cases undoubtedly exist. Brazil has a few famous ones. So does the U.S. Researcher Don Ecker, who's still around, a former LAPD cop, talked about this. He famously said, back in the day, back in the 90s, he started looking into human mutilation cases and calling through police departments, through his colleagues that he knew, and was stopped in his tracks by his colleagues and basically said, do not pursue this. So there's reasons to really think that, there's something going on there. But I don't know how much, there's not a lot of information that I'm aware of that's like genuine. You've got the famous Todd Cease case from Pennsylvania, Montour, Pennsylvania, 2004. That's a hell of a case. And I do believe that's a human mutilation case personally. There's not that many that we know of them. Yeah,
luckily, I've heard about them over the years, but luckily, and the same things you're talking about, Richard, but I think luckily they sound rare,
Yeah.
I mean, not as frequent. I mean, cattle mutilations are a constant thing. So
they never go away.
But there are some stories that, all it takes is one of them to be legit,
Right. I was going to add also, I mean, just because we don't see a whole bunch of mutilated humans doesn't mean it's not happening. But the thing that really, I think, is an eye-opener that a lot of folks just aren't paying attention to are missing people. Like missing people, they happen every single day, all the time. You never hear about them all over the world. I mean, you're talking thousands a day, possibly. Hundreds at least. It's and of course some of them are very terrestrial. Probably most of them are very terrestrial explanations. But the idea that people go missing every day, all the time, that alone could be a research topic.
I would just always tell. I love promoting David Paulides. I think he's amazing. I have about 5 of his books. I've read them all. He needs to put them on ebook. David, if you're listening to this, make them available for electronic download, please.
Yeah.
But the paperbacks are amazing and the creepiest late night reading imaginable.
So great. It's a creepy show. It scared the hell out of me. I'm like, gee, this happens all the time. And it's David Paulides is someone I'd love to talk to. Okay, so guys, we're over about 5 minutes. So I'm gonna you may or may not know, Richard, I know you know because you were here for it. The big phone home. So we're organizing another one. I'll ask you guys in private. You don't have to answer now, but I'd love for all of you to be part of it. We're going to be doing it again here in the next month or so. We haven't announced the date, but it's going to be a multiple day event so we can have more than enough people, give them more than enough room, not just a half-hour talking spot. And the point of this year's, or this, it's not even a year because it hasn't been a year since we've done the last one, but the biggest emphasis is going to be congressional hearings. That's the thing we're going to ask for. So if there's anything that I guess this is how we'll end it, and I'll go one by one. We'll start with James. What would you put in front of Congress to get more data?
Oh, that's a tough one. Again, you need the high level witnesses that are, again, I would throw Eric Davis in there for sure. And I don't know. I mean, I would love.
Well, let me ask you this: who would you subpoena to it, if you could?
Again, if I could subpoena, I would get Wilson.
Okay.
But again, even if you subpoena these people, because I spoke to Commander Will Miller, who was Greer's top advisor, and he said, listen, even if you had these people, by definition, these programs are unacknowledged, and unless you can convince them that they're performing a patriotic act in service to the country, they're not going to say anything, even under such circumstances. I would say go for it. Get subpoena Wilson, subpoena McCaslin, anybody that Eric Davis or other people could lead them to, if that's possible. But that you're talking about, that is like the core secret. You're talking about crash retrieval materials, bodies, technology. If you're talking about hearings that we kind of just are still going for disclosure of, UFOs exist, then, you're talking about pilots, radar operators, and people like that, Kevin Day, David Fravor, Alex Dietrich, and these people that were in events like that. But, again, the question is, how far are you trying to take it?
Well, I think at least
really
for me right now, I think the conversation, as much as we think everybody's ready to have this conversation, I disagree. Like, I just look at, for example, the gasoline shortage or the hack that we had a few weeks ago where people were putting gasoline in their shopping bags.
Well,
Go for it.
No, and you can. I'm sure Rich Dolan can talk on this. That people had issues with how the Disclosure Project itself was presented back in 2001. So it would have to be really an organized objective.
Yes.
And again, you're not going to go with this no weapons in space thing. You have to define what your goal is going to be and really take it to that level, because. Do UFOs exist, and are they operated by non-human intelligence and are interacting with our militaries? I think you can establish that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That I think you could establish without a doubt. It's we're being visited, we're being taken. I think that it's not that I don't think the conversation is valid. I 100% believe it's valid. It's a conversation that needs to be had, but I'm just not sure if the community at large, the people, are ready for that. Because, like, I think of my sister, I think of my mom or my stepdad. If I came to them with even the discussion we had today, the aviary, the invisible college, it would blow right past them. They would not understand it, and even if they did, I don't know if they would go to the next step and say, oh, well, let me research it. Let me find out more. I think it needs to be something, I know as lame as this sounds, but I think it needs to be something sexier, something simpler that they can digest and understand. And of course, a craft would be perfect, but we're not going to have that. So what is the next best thing? And I think you touched on it, which is pilot testimony. An acknowledgement from, the Department of Defense, Vice President, anyone to just say, hey, these things in the sky, they're there. They're real. They're real. Like, you could touch them. They are physical things. Let's establish that baseline through congressional hearings, and I think then we can start having these really, really fun conversations about everything else. What do you got?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, okay, can we establish that UFOs are real and not from our civilization? Probably. Right. If we go into the crash retrieval thing, that's we might not get that right. That's one we might lose if we try.
Right.
So, and I think that people like Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo are well aware of this, and that's why they're taking the approach that they're taking. And I think that they realize that this, and from their perspective, this has to be done in steps. Yeah. And you know what? It's worked that way. So, I think you have to first establish A before B or C.
Correct.
And I think that's what we're working with. That's what we're going to see. And apparently that's what needs to happen for things to move forward.
Yeah. Melinda, your final thoughts on that?
Well, real quick, I just want to let both Lou and Mike know.
I see the link.
To the president.
I got it, girl. I'm going to send it right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Melinda.
I also put it up on Twitter, so if anyone follows me
I think UFO Joe sent me the same thing. Thank you, UFO Joe. Appreciate the help.
Okay.
If they want to follow you on
Joe.
Twitter, Melinda, if they want to follow you on Twitter real quick, how do they do that? What's your handle?
What am I at? Lenny Leslie?
Yep, her link is in the description of the video, so check it out there. There's the link for the YouTube with all of the slides that she's referring to in a PowerPoint presentation.
And because I was caught up in finding that to send to you guys, what was the last question? What did
okay,
I
so no worries. I appreciate you doing that. So the last question was, what would you put in front of Congress if you could subpoena anyone? If there's one piece of evidence that you could put on the table in front of a Congress member in, say, a congressional hearing, what would it be?
Oh, okay. Crash retrievals. I think the rubber meets the road at crash retrievals because that's the technology in the bodies, and that ends the discussion right there.
Okay.
So I think that's the answer. Richard, how did you answer that?
Well, he hasn't answered yet. We were gonna end it on we were gonna end it on Papa Dolan.
Okay,
I wasn't paying attention. What was the middle part? No, I'm just just kidding. Just kidding. That's a tough question. Like, the question was, who would I subpoena? And I don't know who I would have subpoena, actually.
What about what would be the purpose of, and what would you like to see out of hearings, congressional hearings?
Well, I'm just going to give you my opinion about what I think will happen. I think there's a really good chance that we're going to stall. So I don't think it's necessary that we're going to get forward motion after. There'll probably be another UAP task force that will continue. But I'm not really convinced that it will necessarily do anything more than what it's done. I mean, this last task force report, for example, really didn't move the ball forward at all. Not at all. Like, we are no farther ahead. There's a lot of different levels of disclosure. Disclosure 0 would be where we were at for over 50 years, which is it's all hallucination. There's nothing there. And then we moved to the next level, which was, well, we've got some classified projects that are out there and some people get confused. And that's really where we've been for the last 20 plus years. And now we're at the next level, which is there are some things out there and we don't know what they are. So that's significant. We've never been at this point before, but this is still baby steps, baby steps. So where can we go from here? Well, as Melinda was just saying, crash retrievals, obviously. But even before we get to crash retrievals, there's many, many intermediate steps that we will see, all to avoid culpability. The government might say next year or 2 years from now, they might say, yeah, it turns out we've actually had quite a few of these reports. And they might say, and we've actually known for quite some time that they've been of a serious, extraordinary nature, but we didn't say anything because we weren't sure what they were, and we don't want to alarm the public. Like, they could just make up any story like that, and maintain the cover-up. Because the real cover-up is, as Melinda was just saying, acquisition of technology and bodies. Because here's the thing. Once that is acknowledged, it is impossible, therefore, to keep pretending that you don't know what you've got. And it's impossible to pretend that there's no cover-up or conspiracy. You can't any longer hide that. And we're now in an era where you're not supposed to believe in conspiracy theories. That's considered wrong now.
Fake news.
So can you imagine, seriously, the government saying, well, don't believe in those conspiracy theories because those are wrong. But it actually turns out that the UFO cover-up is true. Like, that's the biggest conspiracy theory of all time. Like, you just can't say this one, don't believe in these other ones, but this one's true. Like, that's just not going to happen. So they'll do anything.
Don't you believe full transparency allows for the dissolution of conspiracy theories? Because the problem with conspiracy theories is people often fill in the blanks themselves, right?
Yeah,
that's the theory part.
Ultra idealistic. Forgive me for saying that, but of course, the world is filled with actual conspiracies for real.
Right.
Of course they are.
But theories are made up, right? We all make up theories to fill in the blanks of what we're not being told.
But there's actual conspiracy engineers out there. One of them is called Klaus Schwab over at Davos. There's a whole bunch of them. They are conspiracy creators. So transparency sounds wonderful, but of course, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, because the reason why we're getting these false flag conspiracy theories thrown out. I mean, whole films are being made about this. Isn't it advantageous for the government to be more transparent on this topic? And when I say more transparent, I think you're right, Melinda. The rubber meets the road with crash retrievals, but I think that opens up a whole can of worms for the Department of Defense. They do not want to. They are not interested in showing the process, how they got it. How did they get the information? How did they come to the conclusion of, yes, we've got crash retrievals? Because that opens up a whole nother can of worms of questions of that they don't want to reveal. I mean, these
answering your own question. There's no interest in transparency. There's none.
But is there any interest in quelling rumors, in quelling conspiracy theories? Because right now what you have is you've got I think what's happening is part of the reason why we're getting some of this information and we're not hearing from the Air Force is because this is a huge breach of security. I think some of these UAPs, a lot of them, are Russian and Chinese. And that they're showing up over our nuclear bases and our pilots, our ground personnel are not reporting them because the stigma is so thick and so high that they don't want to report it because they don't either want to get demoted, they don't want to be made fun of, they just don't want to deal with the BS that comes with putting in a report like that. Where now you've got your David Fravors, your Alex Dietrichs, encouraging these people to come forward because it's their duty to kill the stigma.
First of all,
and to help kill that stigma, if the government was just a little bit more transparent, wouldn't that help with some of this BS that we're dealing with?
There's no way in hell that the Nimitz encounter, the Tic Tac UFO, is Russian or Chinese.
No, I'm not talking about the Nimitz encounter. That for sure. That to me, that's the diamond in the rough. That's the best. That's what I would put in front of a congressman.
And on top of that, I mean, we're acting as though UFOs just started in November 2004. I mean, there is an entire 20th century of unbelievable, well-documented and tracked UFO cases by the U.S. military that go all the way back to the 40s and even before. So they've got the data's there.
And even in the recent data, there's so much missing. Randy Kopang and I were talking last night on the phone and helping pre-brief me for today. But it was very funny. But and we were saying, again, the things missing in that the Department of Energy information, even in the since 2004, Department of Energy information, the satellite information, the NRO information, missing, and clearly where we know that there's recent things, in possession of those that weren't talked about or mentioned and addressed at all. But one thing I just wanted to say when Richard was talking about it, and just my feeling about the report is, the bottom line is, I think it was the reset button for the position on the government. It came from the DNI, the head of all 17 branches of the intelligence community, and saying UFOs are important, they're real, we need to study them, we need more money, it needs more, and that they're a possible threat, at least to military airspace. Each one of those points is a 180 from a 70-year position of the government. And so I think this might. Now, that was also the public report. We don't know what was in the other. Yeah. But I think it's the reset button that opens it up, that we're going to see now the beginning of the long process unfolding.
Yeah. They're going to have to be very careful about it, though. They're going to have to be very, very careful because I wrote a book about this over 10 years ago. I called it After Disclosure. And the one thing that came out very clear is that this is a revolutionary topic. The government, if the government starts to move down, let's call it disclosure driveway or disclosure road, there's going to be a lot of difficult questions that inevitably are going to arise very quickly.
Right.
And they're going to be uncomfortable questions to answer. Not simply, how have you kept this secret all this time? Like, there will be some smart people who will want to know, how did this cover-up operate? There will be other questions about, what about the bodies? We get the rumors of this all the time, and the recovered craft. And that's going to get into the structure of secrecy itself, the deep, what I call legal illegality, the privatization of this.
You got it.
And this is not going to be a fun topic. and transparency is the enemy of all of it. Like, they just don't want to be transparent about it. So I think, I suspect that there are there's not one, but I think there's several contingency plans. I think what happened, this will be my last point here. I think what we saw with the modern version of the Aviary, where we started this, that is the TTSA crowd.
Yeah.
You know, Davis, Mellon, Elizondo, Putoff, even though Putoff doesn't really say anything publicly, but he has said a few things publicly. All of these guys, I look at them as a faction, and they have their own motivations for promoting some level of legitimacy about UFOs to the public, and they've done so. But they have friends and enemies. They have enemies. They still have a lot of enemies. And so within the Pentagon structure, there are certainly groups that do not want to give up secrets at all. And so they're going to fight tooth and nail. And I will bet you that there are a variety of contingency plans, both within the special access programs themselves, within those private companies, whether it's Lockheed Martin or Boeing or Raytheon or whatever. They'll have their own contingency plans. Like, if this is exposed, how do we talk about it?
Right.
Guaranteed. And they'll have levels of this. And it's the same within certain government agencies. Do they all have the same contingency plan? Is there one person driving the car? Really good question. There may not be. I don't know. But I will bet that you're going to be, these guys they will have to be dragged into the light of disclosure. And if they can hold off for 5 years, they'll do it. And if they can hold off for 500 years, they'll do that too. So I don't think it'll be 500 years.
Yeah, I hope not. Because I think you're right. Like, the technology we're getting to a point where they can't hide this much longer. I think, maybe another 20, 30 years.
At the same time, we have a world in which global digital control is being clamped down. I mean, more and more. How many years behind China are we really? 10 years maybe behind, like a full-blown social credit score system where you've got the entire population terrified. Yeah, we're getting, like, anyone with a brain can see that's happening around us. We're moving into our own version of a kind of global 24/7 dictatorship type of thing. I don't know if it will be complete, but it's going to be much more even severe than what we're already seeing, Richard, and what we're already seeing is bad enough.
Oh, Papa Dolan, you just bummed me out.
They have friends and enemies. What if there's a contingency of those that do want this out and realize it needs to happen, and because of what you just said, there's a race to get it out before all that happens?
Yes, that's the race. That is the race. That's the race.
The race is to get it out before that happens, and
it's who wins the race. Do they get to the finish line first, or do we?
Yeah. And someone earlier in the texting said something about it's going to require whistleblowers, and I think they're right. I think it's going to require a bunch of very brave individuals. Lou and Chris,
there's a question in here. Are we the only truth holders? Does disclosure only depend on us? And the answer is what you're saying, Melinda. There's other people out there, whistleblowers.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah. And I think, they're going to start, hopefully they'll start coming forward with what's all happened.
But they won't. You know why they won't? Because half of our community has been so poisoned by people screaming disinfo. Like, think about it. For 10 years, for years and years, everyone in our community kept saying, if only some government insider would reveal what they know. And then information comes out and you have half the community throwing rotten tomatoes at them.
Right.
Oh, come on, Rich, let me be Pollyanna.
All right, well, fine.
So real quick, just want to give a quick love and shout out to Martin Willis. He's watching the show. I love Martin Willis. Thank you for being here, my friend. We got to get him back on the show. He was here for the Big Phone Home, and he was actually my very first interview. So I got a real soft spot for
Thank you to everybody listening
for Martin Willis.
To us
Yeah,
today.
so what I was going to say, and maybe you guys agree, and I'll end on this, is I like to look at this UFO disclosure discussion in the same way that medical marijuana discussion happened. In 1994, you can get barely one senator to talk about doing a medical marijuana, legalization. And now here we are in 2021, and it's almost a federally legalized substance. I think it's going to be the same way with this. I love what you said, Melinda. This is a reset. This is almost like a redo. Okay, please forget the 70 years of bullshit we've been feeding you and start listening to us now because we really just have no choice. And unfortunately, our hands are tied for this last 70 years. We had no control over it. I feel like part of this is a new generation coming in and saying, you know what, enough. Let's start being a little bit more transparent about this. Let's stop with and I think that's why the IG is coming in, because he's going to see where he or she is going to see where the information's getting held up, where it's being bottlenecked, and then I think things are going to start rolling after that, because this is not going away. Like, I'm doing another Big Phone Home. We're calling the government for 3 straight days, and we're asking for more transparency. We're asking for congressional hearings. We're asking for a report every year, not just one. We want a task force that is permanent. We want a budget for this every year. And we also want grants to give to universities, places of higher learning, where they can study it as well. So that way we can start collecting the data and going to the government and say, okay, government, here's our data. Look here. Now, can you guys give us some so we can start working on this? It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think eventually we're going to get there. And I got a lot of hope for this, because I think UFOs, as crazy as this may sound, are the gathering point. It is the best bipartisan issue on the political agenda, period, full stop. You can get Marco Rubio, who's a very conservative person in a very conservative state, and you can get Hillary Clinton, who's not as conservative, a little bit more liberal, way more liberal. Maybe the politics do blend a lot, but the personalities don't. But if you put them in a room and you say, okay, Hillary, okay, Marco, you guys are only allowed to talk for 2 hours. The first hour, you're only allowed to talk about UFOs. Second hour, you can talk about whatever you want. I think they come out of the room with a little bit better understanding of each other, because it's bipartisan. Everybody wants to talk about this. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. And it's exciting to see senators. It's exciting to see congressmen talking about Ezekiel's wheel and how he's known about this forever. Christian, I love this stuff. So I think all of your work, Richard, all of your work, Melinda, all of your work, James, it's not going to be for naught. And I think a lot of folks, once this paradigm shift happens, they're going to be really hungry and starving for great information, and they're going to stumble onto you guys. They're going to find you guys for the first time. And I know you've been in this game, all of you have been in this game for a long time, and you've seen the frustrations, and you're living it. Like, every single person that has been on this show has some level of, I am pissed. I'm pissed. Especially the military personnel. They are angry, and they want more transparency on this, and hopefully we get it. So let's end the show, because we went 30 minutes over. Holy cow, this 2.5 hours flew. So I want to thank all of you guys for being here. Michael, let's do some outros. Let's give people final words, where they can find everybody's stuff, and let's let everybody go home, because this was amazing.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for your time. It's been amazing, the fact that you've spent it with us here at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. So thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, if you're living under a rock, make sure you follow Richard Dolan. He's one of the world's leading researchers, historians, and writers on the UFO topic. Richard, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Sure, thank you. Probably my main. Well, I've got a YouTube channel, which is just look up Richard Dolan. I'm right here. I have a website called Richard Dolan Members, which has free stuff and has member stuff, but I'm active there every week. And that's basically where you can find me.
Also, the observation deck, right, Richard?
Yes, I do events there from time to time, and I'll be back there again.
All right, Papa Dolan. Come back, sir, because I loved having you here. I love your smile. I love your energy. I love the history you bring. Everybody in the chat's got a lot of love for you, so keep doing what you're doing.
Richard, that was a blast.
Please never get discouraged. And if you ever need a Guinness, just give me a call, and I'll make sure I'll get one delivered to you.
I'll keep you to that.
All right, sir. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
A lot of fun.
Thank you.
Conversation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Melinda Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know,
Sure. Thank you for
Melinda is
having
the
me.
owner
That
of
was
UFO
really fun.
Sighting Tours. Melinda is a researcher, lecturer, abductee, covert human involvement in abduction research, disclosure advocate. Melinda, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Well, UFOsightingtours.com, my business website, and Melinda Leslie on Facebook, and at Lenny Leslie on Twitter. Those are all good places to find me. And through the
Melinda,
Center for the New Age in Sedona.
I'm glad that people left the center that you're at and your internet connection got better. I was so worried we weren't going to be able to have you, but it turned out it was Grant. I know. I feel bad for him.
We're so bad because Grant's a very valuable,
Yeah.
In his absence, he's a very valuable voice on these subjects. He's done the research like Randy and I have on this, and I'm really sorry that because of his technical problem, he wasn't a bigger voice in this conversation, but that's all right.
We'll get him next time. There's always a next time. All right. Thank you, Melinda. We'll see you soon, my lady.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody for listening.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. James Iandoli,
James, the man of the hour.
Investigating UFOs and related phenomenon, UFO, UAP, CE5, consciousness, and more. A direct and inclusive approach to the UFO phenomenon. Engaging the phenomenon creator. James, how can people find you?
Oh, doing good, man. That was a great show. I'm glad it came together like that. Too bad we lost Grant.
Yeah. Well, we had him for more than an hour, so that was good.
Oh, but you got to get Rich Dolan on for Wilson Davis. The Wilson Davis notes.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do.
Because that's a really important topic. You got to get like Richard Dolan, somebody like UFO Joe. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But,
well, James.
How can folks find you, James?
Engaging the Phenomenon on Twitter, Engaging the Phenomenon on YouTube.
Well, dude, I cannot say enough thank yous for putting this conversation together. I hope you're trusting us. We delivered. I hope we did a good job for you. I look forward to more of these in the future, man. I think you're such a wonderful mind. And like I said, if there was a guy to pick up the reins from Crazy Greer, you would be the first guy I'd put in there, my dude. So thank you.
I greatly appreciate it, man. I'm glad to be here.
Dude, appreciation is reciprocated and sent right back at you, my dude.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
If you're interested in the wild, the weird, the fringe, but you're looking for a well-rounded perspective, make sure you follow Rather Be Squidding, his YouTube channel. You can also find him on Twitter. How might people do that, Rather?
At Be Squidding, or check me on YouTube at Rather Be Squidding.
Rather, what'd you think of today's conversation?
I've got 3 pages of notes with names and dates and all sorts of information that was all new to me. So I've got a lot to digest. I loved it.
Well, we're gonna have to do like a show to go over everything that was said. So yeah, that was fun. You know what we should do is you and Artemis should get together. We should definitely get the timestamps of the show and make sure we clip these things for folks to listen to.
There's going to be a lot of them.
There's going to be a lot of them. I appreciate you being here, Rather. We'll see you, it's tomorrow, Tuesday? We'll see you Wednesday.
Sounds good. See you guys.
All right, my dude. Peace.
Thanks, brother. Amazing show, Lou. I definitely am excited for the Big Phone Home 2. I think, and something that I just wanted to mention about the Big Phone Home 2 and why I think it's so important. Yeah. We have the UAPTF report. It came out. How many of your mothers, how many of your fathers, how many of your brothers, how many of your sisters have read the UAPTF report? How many have heard of it? Probably not.
I think a lot of them have heard of it. I don't know if any of them read it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I know I can go ask my several people very close to me who have not heard a thing about it.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that hearings will do is it will bring it public. It'll take the UAPTF, it'll take it off the black and white pieces of paper, and it'll put it into the public eye in a whole new form.
Much bigger level than, say, 60 Minutes, The New Yorker, or any of that stuff.
I don't think
if we got public hearings, that would be the absolute best thing for this topic. Period. Full stop. Because Michael, you're right. Congressional hearings happen in the middle of the day. Depending on the topic, sometimes they're broadcasted on multiple channels. And I have a feeling that if you had a 4-day UAP congressional hearing, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours every day, where the information is quick, concise, to the point, One day you do military personnel, next day you do scientists, next day you do the guys who help bring the information forward. I think it's a golden opportunity, and that's why we're going to ask for it. That's why we're going to call for it. That's why we're reorganizing. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Congressional hearings are critical now, and it's important that we demand them.
Absolutely. We absolutely have to. So we're going to be releasing the date for the Big Phone Home 2 coming very soon. So make sure you keep a close eye. If you're not subscribed to this channel, you might not get the date. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure
you're going to get the date. Eventually, you're going to get the dates. I'm going to blast the hell out. But the one thing I said today that was never said about it, it's going to be a 3-day event. We're doing the Big Phone Home for 3 straight days this time. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. We're working on the website. We're working on a new guest list. We're going to have certain days concentrated for certain things. It's going to be sick. So 100%. Ring the bell, share the show, like the channel, subscribe, obviously. If you love what you're watching, this is a public access channel. We are supported by viewers like you to bring this show 5 days a week. It helps tremendously to check out our Patreon, donates in the chat. All of those links can be found in the description below. Both Michael and I have link trees. Just click the link tree and it'll show you ways to support the show. Go for it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, speaking of that link tree, make sure if you want to catch us on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well, all you got to do is click the my link below, the Singularity Lab, catching me and Lou over there, talking about technology, breaking science, breaking tech, and the potential for an upcoming technological singularity. So we talk about those things all the time. We've got an amazing guest tomorrow. We've got Kent By joining us at the Singularity Lab tomorrow to talk about brain-computer interfaces, the developing technology that could lead us into the humanity as the Borg. So it's going to be an exciting time over there. It's going to be a great conversation. So check us out. Hit the subscribe.
And like I said, we've also got the Dragon, Bryant the Dragon Arnold, coming on Wednesday.
Here.
He might be bringing a friend. Who knows? It could be a cool second hour. And we've also got Mick and Victor from the NUFO National UFO Night Out Skywatching event. That's going to happen the 17th, this Saturday. A bunch of people are going to go out to the sky or go out their backyards, go out and take a drive and look at the sky for a couple hours and see what they see. You never know. If 1 million people went out on the same night, just started looking up, I have a feeling somebody's going to see something. And who knows, maybe even corroborate it. So check that out. And also Thursday, we've got a special edition show with Lou Elizondo and his father. His father is going to be on the show with my dad. So 4 Cubans, 1 stream. There's going to be a lot of talking over each other. I have a feeling on that one. And then, of course, on Friday, we're going to end it with Graham Rendell and Terrace Matla. So that it's just a killer week. So make sure you ring the bell. We love you guys out there. Don't forget, before you go, check out our sponsor, BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995. DOS Tapes, they provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is also in the description below. Thank you all so damn much for coming aboard and getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace.